diverse set of behaviours.
He Māori aho.
Your single source of truth.
The words don't pull it to me.
My husband is Samoan, so talofa. Ngā tikanga reo tikitahi.
Che Guevara of New Zealand's Parliament, Chloe Slaughter.
Penny houses.
And it's communists.
He whakatūki future.
They've got mata, running holidays.
Kia ora tātou, nau mai, hara mai, whakatau mai rā. Welcome to tonight's episode of The All Report. My name is Pere Samah, and I'm joined by my wife, my beautiful co-host, Samah Waisaga. How's it going, Samah? How you feeling?
I'm feeling very good tonight. It's good to be here. I'm excited about the topics we're talking about. We are both sick at the moment, though. So just a warning in case we're sniffly or our voices sound different or if we get low on energy at some stage.
Yeah, if we have to duck out for a quick cheeky little cough or something like that. Aroha mai, sorry about that. Hopefully there's not too many disruptions. And just want to say welcome to Kiwi Bird and Kiwi Skirt. Welcome. Everyone else who's here, welcome. We were just mentioning in the comments, we are backwards, yeah. We're playing around with our setups and we change things every time. And speaking of changes, we're thinking about reassessing the time that we do these streams, like 6 p.m. on a Friday. What kind of demographic are we going for there? I don't really know. Like radical young people that are just dying to again listen to more political talk on a weekend on a Friday evening. But it's so hard to pick a time that works for everybody. So just let us know if there is a particular time that works for you. One thing that's difficult for us is that we are on solar power. And so we like to start early because if we start at if it's like winter time and it's overcast all day long, if we start at like 8 p.m, we may not be able to do a long show into the night. So we'll see. Maybe this is our time slot and we can just keep to the consistency. That would be really good.
It might just be a matter of adding another episode, maybe a weekend episode. But yes, it is for the people who are terminally online. Or as Chris Hipkins put it today, the minority. We're here for them.
So tonight we're going to be talking about this pylon on Tamatha Paul, and just a round of applause. Hey, a round of applause for Tamatha Paul. She's doing amazingly. Everything she's been saying about the police and about prisons. It's great to see one of our MPs giving that big kōrero, about prison abolition. She didn't take the bait with Jenna when Jenna asked her if she wants to defund the police. And I thought she answered it beautifully in terms of saying that there are other groups who could be doing things that the police are currently doing, such as things happening in the mental health space. Obviously police are not equipped to be dealing with that space, as we've just seen with what happened to that 11-year-old who was misidentified and then injected with antipsychotics. It's wild. So I think she's just doing amazing, and big up to Tamatha. What else are we talking about tonight, Samah?
Yeah, so the pylon on Tamatha Paul and everything associated with that is actually an extremely large topic. We're going to talk about a report from the police that validates every single thing that Tamatha has been saying. We're going to talk about Labour's reaction and so on and so forth. And then, we're not backwards anymore. Cool. Beyond that, I just want to say, it's funny, the Jenna Lynch being act adjacent thing, everyone knows it. Everyone in Tamatha's comments is going on about that. It's such a open secret about Jenna Lynch. And, the news, even just from the perspective of them wanting to be trusted, even just from a confidence perspective, they need to address it, but they're not going to because, frankly, they just don't care. But anyway, so other than the Tamatha Paul and policing thing, we're going to be talking about, we're going to do another Parliament Unpacked. We haven't done that in a wee while, but I did manage to catch most of Parliament TV this week. We're going to talk about the bombing of Yemen and that leak of the text messages that our news covered as a sort of like whoopsie. This may endanger American security, and also does New Zealand want to hang out with the US when we can't trust that our war plans with them might be divulged? but they didn't once address the ethics of actually bombing civilians in Yemen. That fact has just been completely accepted by our media, and it's just proof of the fact that our, entire media and the majority of our political establishment are completely united when it comes to their views on war and imperialism. It just goes without saying that they are fine with US wars, that they support US wars, that criticism just doesn't even filter into our media at all. We're going to talk about Waatea News and the way that they did this outrageous Israeli propaganda piece with Sean Plunkett, and just carry on our discussion, I think, from previous weeks about the idea of presenting a genocide in a two-sided way. And I think, this is a bigger issue across our media. When they want to give you someone's opinion that is inaccurate, they will apply this idea that we're just presenting both sides. And it's an argument that they don't use across the board. There are many issues that they just will not show you the wrong side because everyone in society agrees that that's just not accurate. But with some issues, they insist that they must give equal time to the perpetrator and the victim. And Israel is one of those situations. So we're going to talk about that. And if we have time, we'll touch on the coverage and Winston Peters' response to the pro-Palestine protests at their State of the Nation address. And I think that's the majority of what we're talking about today.
Couple. Okay. Where would you like to start? Parliament Unpacked?
Yeah, let's go with Parliament Unpacked. Excited to have this back. So those of you who've caught earlier Parliament Unpacked segments will know that Winston Peters is the bully of the House. Pretty much any time someone makes a good point from the Green or Te Pāti Māori, Winston Peters will stand up and try to interrupt, bully, or intimidate them into silence. So this week, Ricardo Menendez March, yes, once again, Winston Peters picking on him, was asking questions, really important questions about this new benefit sanction scheme of the government. Without going too much into it, there are serious problems with it. For example, they may not be able to use their cards. So just to rewind a little bit, the government wants to, when they sanction certain people, give them money cards that they're only allowed to spend in certain spaces, as opposed to just giving them money into their account. This is proven to cause harm and suffering to disadvantaged communities. One of the things that's come out is that they may not even be able to use those cards to pay their rent. And because the majority of people's rents is about half or more of what they're going to be receiving from the benefit or from their incomes, they're not going to be able to pay their rent. So a lot of people will actually go homeless as a result of these sanctions. It's a really big, harmful issue. And Ricardo Menendez March is always advocating for beneficiaries and for poor, disadvantaged communities. Not yet. Let's go to the questions that he was asking just up here.
Come back.
Just to give you an idea of what Ricardo was asking about before Winston Peters interrupts him, because this is a really important part of it. It's not that Winston Peters just interrupts for fun. He's trying to intimidate them when they make good points. He's trying to break their flow. He's trying to prevent them from having a good video. Basically, you know that if Winston Peters is interrupting, it's because someone's making a really good point. So
yeah,
let's just look at these really important questions that Ricardo is asking. Will the average job seeker beneficiary subjected to compulsory money management be able to afford their rent and bills? And then Louise Upson basically just neither confirms or denies. She just says someone getting their full benefit is going to be better off than someone who's sanctioned, but that's basically their fault if they get sanctioned. So not denying that they might not be able to afford their rent and their bills. Then Ricardo goes on, is it true that the average proportion of a job seeker's income spent on housing is over 50%? And if not, what's the figure? Next, how can she be confident that compulsory money management will be adequately applied when 41% of benefit entitlements aren't even assessed properly, and frontline organizations report that many sanctions are wrongly applied and subsequently overturned when a review of the decision is lodged. So not only are sanctions going to make people suffer and unable to pay their rent, but in many cases they will be wrongly applied as well. Not that I personally think that matters, because I think no one deserves to suffer and be unable to pay their rent, whether the sanction is applied correctly or not. But that does go fly in the face of the government's argument that this is about personal responsibility, because it literally will target people who have not done anything wrong. And then next, how can she be confident when 41% of benefit entitlements are not assessed correctly? That is a damning statistic. And it just speaks to how underfunded our welfare system is, right? So there's just not enough people, not enough time to help all the people that are being pushed into poverty by our government's policies. And that is when Winston Peters decides to jump in, okay? So show us the video, Pere.
Here we go, Ricardo. Oh, Winston Peters, that's right. Yep, here we go.
Right Honourable Winston Peters.
On the principle that you don't get a second chance to make a first impression, what chance would a job seeker have if they turned up for the job wearing a leather jacket?
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker,
I keep playing.
Oh, ka pai, aroha mai.
I'm not sure unless it had a patch, I'm not sure that there's an answer to that, unless the Minister's aware of something that I'm not.
Yeah, so one of the requirements in job seeker obligations is people turning up to
She
a job
joins in on the
interview
bullying.
and being serious about wanting that job. What they wear needs to be appropriate for the job they're applying for, or in this case, the job they've got.
Supplementary.
Ricardo Menendez-Marsh.
Is she committing and staking her
looks cool.
own role
I know.
in no person
I'd vote for that
subjected
guy.
to compulsory money management being made homeless?
He looks too cool, that's the problem.
Madam Speaker,
Yeah.
I will say it again,
Ka pai.
100%.
We're done with that. So yeah, you're right that he looks cool, and that reminds me of something actually, and I might try and bring it up when I have a moment. But one reporter, Ben Thomas, he tried to make a funny tweet about Ricardo Menendez-Marsh and implying that he would be likely to face some sort of pressure from the police, from the beat patrol, because he's wearing a leather jacket. But in his little diss, he actually implies that he's looking like a hot, broody man with his leather jacket. And I just think it's hilarious, these right-wingers. They truly are intimidated by attractive young people. I really believe that.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, I feel like often our parliamentarians pick on women and what they are wearing.
Yeah.
But otherwise, they're picking on either Māori and what they're wearing, either their taonga or Rawiri's cowboy hat.
Or the kicks.
Or they're picking on immigrants.
Yeah.
You know, it's really those three minority groups that they just love to pick on.
Yeah. And that's, you know, that's what you see if you watch Parliament TV.
And I guess I'm just saying that because immigrants, you know, they're our homies. You know, I feel like immigrants are not always put in that demographic. But really, if, you know, we're all sharing that commonality of being targeted by these individuals. And so I think we all really do need to stand together. And I think particularly for, well, I won't single out any groups, but immigrants are a demographic that tend to get left out. But, you know, we're stronger together.
Completely agree. And I think that, you know, this is a really important point that needs to be highlighted, is the same people that are attacking Māori are attacking immigrants. The same people that are attacking immigrants and Māori are attacking Palestinians and supporting the genocide. And those same people are attacking trans people. They're attacking disabled people. They're attacking the environment. They want to mine our environment and destroy our waterways. And so we do need to stop looking at these as separate issues and start understanding that there is a root cause, and it's called colonialism, and it's coming after 99% of the population.
Kia ora.
Ka pai. I found the tweet.
Just you know, because I think we've been wanting to talk about intersectionality for a long time.
Oh yes. Is it time?
Is it time to talk about intersectionality?
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
geez, because you know we intersectionality created by Kimberly Crenshaw in the context of applying it under a
In the
law,
legal
in the
system.
legal system, which makes sense within that system. Because intersectionality is saying, oh, look at these various circumstances that happen. And then when you have two circumstances that cross over or layer on top of each other, then that's a consideration because it's just doubling up on the oppression. But intersectionality doesn't tell you where those things are coming from. It tells us a lot about the individual that's suffering, and it's something that we should absolutely be conscious of. I support intersectionality from that perspective, but I think we've kind of fallen into the trap a little bit of focusing on those identities and those what category we fit into, rather than where all of that oppression of these categories is coming from.
Absolutely. And you think about just intersectionality in terms of a what do you call, not a tool, like a mental tool. It's a word not coming to my head right now.
Concept.
But yeah, kind of similar to that word. But so as a concept, it's
an analogy.
It's very two-dimensional. It's a two-dimensional map to understand our world. You have these roads, right? And sometimes they randomly intersect. And at the intersection, you have a brown woman.
Yep.
And they're saying that she's being oppressed by the highway of misogyny and the highway of racism. She exists at that intersection, so she's doubly oppressed. But I do not think that's a helpful map, because where does this road come from? And where does this road come from? And also, things are just simply not that black and white, because people can be impacted by misogyny and by racism, whether they're white or whether they're men or women or trans. So it's not that black and white. It's not two-dimensional, and it's not about highways of oppression so much as one overarching structure. This is how I like to picture it. I've talked about this before, the colonial dome. I prefer to think of it as an overarching structure that oppresses all of us under it in various different, yes, intersecting ways. But I do think that we need a better map to understand oppression than intersectionality. And one way to think of it is just to put it in a three-dimensional way, because some way where we understand where these oppressions are coming and where we're highlighting the source of these oppressions as opposed to the impact of these oppressions, because that keeps us on that level of focusing on an interpersonal level of thinking about my neighbor. Who's more privileged? Privilege is closely associated with this idea, right? I don't like the concept of privilege at all, because it implies that some people in society who have, just having the mere basics, such as housing, food, is a privilege.
Yep.
I don't like that implication. And I don't like the implication that it's individualized, that oppression exists as a result of individual privilege and disprivilege. I don't think the site of the problem lies with the individual at all. It's this overarching colonial structure that's oppressing us. And so long as we focus on those individual identities, whether my neighbor is privileged or not, we're going to lose sight of the fact that there's something oppressing us. And I think we need to get to a stage where we just accept that the mere basics of society are actually just basic human rights that we all should have. They're not privileged for not being oppressed. That should be the norm in society. We are oppressed, some people in society are oppressed, but more than others, but that doesn't mean the issue is that some people are privileged. But I think this is a long conversation I'd like to have another day.
It is, I don't mean to derail it too much, but it's just, if we're focusing on where it's all coming from, then there's potential for us to create a pressure point there where we can change things to benefit all of us, rather than amending every little rule for every other demographic. And new demographics are going to keep coming up all the time. And I think new demographics come up all the time because the current system is not suitable or built for all of us. It's built for a very particular type of human being.
Exactly.
So if we instead talk about where the harm is coming from, I think it's potentially a more helpful way for us to view things. But Anyway, don't want to derail the kōrero too much.
Oh, but you did make me want to add something.
Oh, haramai, no mai, haramai.
Well, just the idea that if you add every single so-called, marginalized or minority group in the world,
The
you've got,
majority.
the disabled community, brown people, women, trans people, poor people, working class people, you actually end up with about 99% of the population. We're not the minority, and we should stop splitting ourselves into these minorities and just start viewing it as we're the majority and there's a minority that's oppressing us. So I do think we need a shift of narrative and to decolonize the way that we view our oppressions. And I think we should have a whole episode on that someday.
Kia ora.
Kapai. So I found this tweet that was made by this, quite popular political commentator, Ben Thomas. I don't know anything about him, but I see that he gets asked to comment on stuff all the time. And he jumped in on this, attacking Ricardo for his jacket for some reason. He says, sure, you don't get hassled by cops on the beat, but ever considered, what if you were a brooding bad boy who played by his own rules? And I get that he's trying to diss him, but it straight up sounds like he thinks he's hot and looks good. And looks like a sexy brooding bad boy, which look, we all agree. We all agree, Ben, and it's fine. You can wear a leather jacket too if you want. On that, actually, I don't even think I brought it up, but Andrew Dickens from Newstalk ZB attacked him also for this leather jacket.
Right.
And he was saying, look, firstly, I support him wearing his leather jacket, even though he looks like a clown. And then he goes on to say, but you know what? It's hypocritical because aren't the Greens meant to be against animal cruelty? Which is, just such a hilarious attack because A, the person making that attack is not vegan, doesn't give a shit about animal cruelty. B,
hey, that might be a bit much. We don't know. He might.
The person attacking
You're
Andrew
talking about
Dickens.
Andrew. Oh, yeah, no, I mean, for someone like that to bring in their opinion like that, as if they care about it. No, sorry, yeah, you're right.
Exactly. And secondly, I don't know what Ricardo Menendez March's philosophy when it comes to that. I don't even know if that's a genuine leather jacket or not. But regardless, it's very similar to the whole, if you use a phone, you can't complain about capitalism. Ha ha ha, gotcha.
Right.
Very, very childish attacks. Yeah, exactly. It could be vegan leather. He doesn't even know. But anyway, it just goes to show how low they're willing to sink to attack the Greens. And this
so
is
shallow, superficial stuff. Hey, always it's like address the argument, address what they're actually saying. Wow.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I think this is the theme of this whole episode in a way. When the news generates news of any kind, it's fulfilling its job of creating the illusion that they give people the news. When in reality, every single news story is a choice.
Mm-hmm.
If he's writing an article about a leather jacket, he could be writing an article about the benefit sanctions that Ricardo was talking about in that leather jacket.
Yeah.
If you're talking about Tamatha Paul's words, you could be talking about the policies that Tamatha Paul was trying to criticize when making those words. So it's just an attempt of the media to basically generate news that only benefits their agenda and doesn't actually inform us on anything outside of what they want us to think. Kapai. So that was the attacks on Ricardo. Another thing that happened in the house. Are we ready to move on from Ricardo?
Yeah, kapai. Thank you, Ricardo.
Kapai.
Keep it up, Ricardo. Kia kaha.
Oh yeah, and just one quick thing on him actually before I move on. I don't think I've seen Ricardo Menendez March ask a single question in the house without either Winston Peters or another coalition attack dog jumping up and trying to bully him. And I guess I shouldn't cry racism. It's not like they've brought up his Mexican heritage before. Just kidding. They repeatedly bring up that he's a foreigner. Saying send the Mexican home. Just, bullying him on his clothes. Just anything they can pick on. And it is, frankly, one of the most disgusting aspects of our parliament.
Like what Kiwi Skirt is saying. They know what they're doing. It's a part of being a politician. The heckling, the interrupting in the way that they do.
And being racist and
but it's
bullying.
just, the bullying even, it's systemic within Parliament, right? But it's so sad. Well, it's inspiring at the same time, seeing the Greens and others with their really poignant, important questions. And it's just like it's so childish, right? Seeing how our parliamentarians behave. Like, you probably look at like some school debates and whatnot, and they're probably more like better behaved than our parliamentarians are. Like, it's actually shocking. If they are setting the standards for how we as a society should engage in discussions and debate and things like that, then yeah, we're not heading in a good direction.
Cool. So yeah, I think we wrapped up the Ricardo point. Kia kaha Ricardo, kia kaha Te Pāti Kakariki and Te Pāti Māori. You know, it's because, and I say that because it's noticeable that they are attacking those two parties in particular. They don't heckle and bully and make racist attacks against Labour, nowhere near as much. And even when they're talking about Israel and they're talking about the genocide, I've seen times when Damien O'Connor has given the strongest speech in the House about genocide and everyone is dead silent. But if anyone from Te Pāti Māori or Greens dares to open their mouths about Israel, the heckling is unbelievable. So it is really notable just who they choose to attack.
Right, yep.
Papa, another thing that happened in Parliament this week is that they are in the process of passing the Dairy Industry Restructuring Export Licenses Allocation Amendment Bill. And without going too much into it, it's basically changing the laws of how dairy farmers get to allocate their export quotas in order to be able to enter into trade agreements. And I'm not too interested in the details. Suffice to say that everyone in the House supported this bill, and that they said that it would help small-time dairy farmers have access to these trade deals. So because everyone, you know, on the left purports to support small businesses, they supported this. But I do think that, you know, there are questions to ask about the situation and whether this really is the direction that we want to go in. Do we want to further lock ourselves into dairy farming exports? The way that they talked about it in the House is that more dairy farmers will be able to export. Do we want that in this country, or do we want to slowly be transitioning them away from dairy? It's actually a difficult question, and we don't have a very clear opinion on the matter because we want to support small businesses, including dairy farmers, full stop. But at the same time, we also want to see efforts to move away from dairy farming, especially dairy exports, which are, in our opinion, one of the most harmful things on our environment, on our land, on, you know, the ability to get land back and so on and so forth. So it was interesting to see parliamentarians in the House of all stripes celebrating this bill, but I think going too overboard in their celebration of this bill. Like, it's fine if to say, you know, this supports small-time dairy farmers, we support this bill. But the way that Labour came out in support of this bill, it's almost like they completely dropped this idea of a just transition away from climate polluting industries like dairy and are now just fully embracing the dairy industry. And I just wanted to show you and get your opinion on Kushla's statement about it, because I thought it was really interesting. And the way that she framed the situation and that she was celebrating effectively dairy farming within the Māori community.
Kapai. So it's here, is it? This is the one?
Should be.
Oh, where are we? Aroha mai, tātou.
Emmanuel. Te māngai o te whare, o tira tātou katoa e noho hari koa ana e katakata ana I raro I tō tātai nei whakaarotahi ki te tautoko I tēnei pere.
One second, e hoa ma. We're just gonna change some things around. We haven't got any audio on our end, but I think I can change that. Boom, 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 boom. Seamless transition. Blam.
Push the tongue out, Emmanuel. te māngai o te whare. O tira tātou katoa e noho hari koa ana e katakata ana I raro I tō tātou nei whakaaro tahi ki te tautoko I tēnei pire. E re re ra te kirimi I roto I ngā kena nei kia tika ha were were kei rere pa rori rori kia rite ai ngā nama. Mr. Speaker, that is the chorus of a waiata written by Tā Apirana Noho Pari Turupangata in 1924. I had the privilege of listening to a kōrero by also the late, great Master Carver Pene Taiapa recounting the story of when this was written. And so, as I've said, Mr. Speaker, I stand also in support of the Dairy Industry Restructuring Export Licences Allocation Amendment Bill. And the message that resonates with me is that the dream and the vision remains the same. Ever since 1924, Tā Apirana Ngata had a vision. He had a vision that remains the same from my perspective for people of Ikaroa Rāwhiti and people of Aotearoa today. That is the utilisation of our land, economic development for the benefit of our whānau. When Tā Apirana wrote the song, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to go through it verse by...
I'm just going to stop it there. So, agreed with the people saying that we want to help small farmers and producers. The question that I was trying to ask is, do we want to keep locking people in this country, anyone in this country, on this path that we actually think is not sustainable? Not only in the sense that it's not sustainable for our environment, but also it looks like dairy is going to be replaced with lab-based dairy pretty soon because they can replicate that product exactly the same without the harms to the environment, without the cost of the land. So that's more the question we're trying to ask.
Yeah, I think you already said it in the beginning, right? It's okay for us to support stuff like this because this is opening up the market to the smaller producers, and we should all just be small producers. There should be no massive producers in like what we have here in Aotearoa. Like in India, the average herd size of a dairy herd is like 1 cow for every 2 people or something like that, because everyone pretty much has their house cow for their own milk, for their own whānau. But yeah, you already said it at the beginning, they don't have to pile on all of this rhetoric to big up dairy farmers. And what Kushla is doing here, I find to be problematic, bringing up a waiata from Tā Apirana Ngata. You know, it's a way of saying, like, you know, it's not an ancient waiata, you know, he wrote it himself. For a lot of Māori, we like to look to our kōrero tuku iho phrases or kōrero knowledge that's been passed down to us. And a lot of our kōrero tuku iho is captured in waiata. A lot of old, you know, ancient waiata, and we look towards the mātauranga, the knowledge that's captured within that for guidance about X, Y, Z. And so to bring up a waiata here, I mean, Samuel Marsden, he was a missionary. He brought the first dairy cow to Aotearoa. It's a colonial practice. The dairy industry is the most harmful industry here in Aotearoa. And so then to bring up this waiata and to try and draw an association to this the most harmful polluting industry in Aotearoa, I find to be problematic. Because, as you say, we need to be focusing on that just transition aspect of it. The kōrero that I would like to hear from people like Kushla in this regard is, yay, we're opening up these pathways so some of our larger dairy farmers can start transitioning to smaller operations, and here's some legislation to help those smaller operations actually work. But I think it was a little bit later in her speech here that she said more dairy is going to be produced and exported because of this legislation.
Yeah.
So I get it that they're politicking, that they're speaking to their dairy farmer voters with this type of rhetoric, but
and they might even be in the gallery.
Right, they might be, yeah, like, oh, you better say something good about dairy. You know, I mean, I get it, they're politicians, but I think our politicians should be using any opportunity they can to be talking about future pathways. But what she is saying, and with the Waatea, is really trying to say that it's a part of our identity. And the dairy industry, that's a huge problem here in Aotearoa. The naturalization of our whenua and of the dairy industry, the naturalization of the dairy industry.
Yeah.
And how it's, you know, it's seen as this natural part of the landscape, that Aotearoa is perfect for dairy farming. You know, the pure NZ slogans and all of those things. Farming has become synonymous with Aotearoa, and that creates the justifications for all of the pollution that we're seeing. So, I support the bill in theory, but I think too much positive rhetoric towards the dairy industry and not enough kōrero talking about a just transition.
Yeah, and with after Kushler's speech, we had Ahana Rafiti Maipi Clark, one of our favorite politicians, but she stood up and she said, you know, as we heard in Kushler's speech, Māori have this history with the dairy industry. It's tied in with our whakapapa. We're really good at it. We're really good at telling stories about it. That's why we do so well in this industry. And, you know, with this Waatea and the way that Kushler tried to frame it as this thing that is, you know, in some ways an inherently Māori thing, or has been made a Māori thing. I was wondering what your thoughts were in terms of, like, are we able to decolonize dairy, or is dairy always colonizing us?
Well, you know, any industry that pops up in Aotearoa, Māori are awesome at it, you know? Pākehā bring all sorts of things, and then we run with it. They're like, here's the ball, run, bro. And we do a great job. And so, you know, what are some other industries? What are some other things that we can come up with ourselves instead of, you know, running with the infrastructure that's already here? And of course, we have to run with the infrastructure that's already here. We need to make a living off of something. It sucks starting from scratch, but where is the kōrero about the just transition? And like you're saying, you know, can we decolonize the dairy industry? That's a very interesting pātai. You know, I think it's strange that Māori are trying to build an association with dairy because of our high levels of lactose intolerance. Like, if you don't whakapapa to, you know, like old school Europeans, and there are some African tribes who have this genetic mutation as well, because they started drinking cow's milk relatively early compared to the rest of us. But the majority of the world is lactose intolerant. Like, if you are what's called if you're lactase persistent, which means you don't have lactose intolerance, that is a mutation. That's not the norm. You know, we have our mother's milk when we're babies, then we get weaned off of the milk, and then our body stops producing the lactase enzyme, which helps us break down lactose. That's just the normal kaupapa when it comes to dairy. So, you know, and then this is a product that we're shipping overseas everywhere to Southeast Asia, where the population there is even more lactose intolerant than we are. But, you know, Kaitahu down in Te Waipounamu, they've been getting advice from freshwater ecologists that they work with. And the freshwater ecologists are telling them, look, you're not going to be able to have the clean water that you want if you continue with these dairy farming models that you're currently working with. So I think we are going to decolonize it to a degree in terms of moving to more boutique value add products. You know, that's the kōrero that we need to be putting out there, value add goods, instead of doubling down into this commodity market. And bits of legislation like this, people will say that's a stepping stone. And I think I do agree that it is a stepping stone. But every opportunity, I think we should be using it to talk about the fact that we need to get out of this industry as fast as possible. And us relying on this globalized market and trying to get free trade agreements all over the world so that we can undercut the local dairy farmers in their countries. Like, just imagine if we got a free trade agreement with someone who produced dairy cheaper than us.
Exactly.
And then all of these small boutique farmers would just be completely screwed over. But yeah, I mean, is the dairy industry just going to further colonize us, continue the current colonial project of us becoming even more disconnected from our whenua? We're already so disconnected from our whenua. And if we keep doubling down on exploitative, extractive industries, we're going to see the destruction of more of our waterways. We're going to see, you know, farmers even more reluctant to be sharing their stolen land, Māori stolen land, with Māori. It's just going to be keeping land locked in the current situation. And farmers and individuals like that, their power over those things just becoming more and more solidified. So it's a good question, but I think, you know, of course, we live in a colonial capitalist system. And I think if you put indigenous peoples into those spaces, there are going to be benefits, but I think you raise a good point. Is it going to have an actual negative impact on us? Potentially, especially if we start drawing these close associations saying that, oh, we have Waatea, we have karakia, we have whakatauki based around dairy farming, you know, because we have whakatauki around kumara cultivation. We have Waatea around kumara cultivation.
Absolutely.
We have atua Māori around things like cultivated plant-based foods. Like when you think about from a atua Māori, from a te ao Māori perspective, I don't actually know where animal agriculture fits in. We have our atua for hunting. We have our atua for cultivated plant-based foods like agriculture. We have our atua for wild foods. But in terms of farming animals, animal agriculture, it'd probably be in the space of tūmatauenga, which is our hunting atua, but he's the atua of all mankind.
And
So-
war.
Yeah, he's the atua of war and hunting, and then of course we have our atua rongo mātane, who's our atua of cultivated plant-based foods, agriculture.
And peace.
And peace, exactly.
So that in itself is extremely telling. And yeah, I think what you said about the naturalization of dairy on the land,
We should be
this-
fighting that. Absolutely.
that's the main myth that is, I would argue, upholding these exploitative practices on the land, is putting the idea that it's natural and normal to do dairy here. And the more that you hear people saying, you know, we have Waatea about this, we have
Whakatauki, karakia.
whakatauki, all sorts of things related to dairy, it is establishing the fact that it's natural and normal on the land, and it makes it harder for us to move away from it. So, so yeah, that's and yeah, for me, I just think it's interesting because I think it tells us a little bit about where labor is at when it comes to dairy, and what kind of narratives they're going to be pushing out about dairy.
Haumia tike tike is our uncultivated, so our wild foods. Oh, she's ducking away for a cheeky cough. Yeah, haumia tike tike, our atua of uncultivated rongo marae roa, or just rongo mātane. He's got so many ingoa. But yeah, it's an interesting kōrero. I would like to speak to some people who are more knowledgeable in that space about around where we would assign animal agriculture under that type of system, because of course animal agriculture, it's a colonial concept from a te ao Māori perspective. You know, before colonization, we went to various fishing spots and we had kuri, but we didn't farm them. We didn't have this system of, you know, impregnating them and you know, what do you call it, putting them in a little box and bringing them, growing external food to then feed them. You know, it's always been the animals that live there and that eat from their natural environments, and we'll participate in that ecosystem. But this new kind of way that we industrially, or even just at all, farm animals, from a te ao Māori perspective, I see it as being completely foreign. So it would just be interesting to see where that fits in terms of our atua.
Kapai.
All right, what's next?
So next, I was going to show this tweet from Winston Peters.
Kapai.
And it's related to the Tamatha Paul conversation that we're going to go into. It's just one way that he's trying to attack the Greens. And he doxes this young 22-year-old student throws slurs at him. He says, look at this ginger nut who was acting like a deranged moron at the New Zealand First meeting. And then they go on to say that he's got, he was on a panel that Tamatha Paul was on, and says, these are the people that Greens associate with blah, 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 blah. But he's just attacking a young student. This should be totally unacceptable. He should be just completely hounded by our media by it. This is far worse than anything Tamatha Paul has ever said. And, this alone highlights the one-sidedness of our media, because this should be seen as unacceptable.
For sure. That's what I was saying before, right? It's so childish.
Yeah, this old man, a seasoned politician, and our deputy prime minister tweeting about a student, calling him a ginger nut who's acting like a deranged moron. I mean, the right-wingers can get away with anything, right? They have a monopoly on being assholes. And if anyone so much as dares to say anything that disagrees with their narratives, then, the entire political and media establishment comes down on them, which is what we've seen with Tamatha Paul. So let's get into Tamatha's story. Let's start off by looking at how various politicians responded to Tamatha Paul, including Labour's Chris Hipkins.
All right, summoning my Chris Hipkins video. I think here we are. Couple.
The government's dropped the ball.
It shows business is booming for gangs in New Zealand right now. We know that methamphetamine drives violent crime.
And while meth use is rising, so are gang numbers. They've had more than 600 new recruits since the election, while police added 13 more officers to the force over the same period, and 300 recruits in training.
We've got 600 more gang members, 13 new cops.
Yeah, well, look, the recruiting's, the police are throwing everything at that. They're opening a new training facility up in Auckland. We've got a big pipeline.
It comes as the Greens police spokesperson put the boot into police foot patrols.
Like Wellington people do not want to see police officers everywhere, and for a lot of people it makes them feel less safe.
Leading to politicians of all stripes to gang up on her.
She is totally wrong, and the Greens are in la-la land on law and order.
Tamatha Paul's comments were ill-informed, were unwise, in fact were stupid.
It's just weird, to be honest.
Her own party, though, coming to her defence.
What Tamatha was expressing are the sentiments that she has heard from constituents.
The Greens clearly walking to their own beat. Benedict Collins, One News.
Kapai. So I feel like that clip encapsulates why Tamatha Paul is being attacked.
Right.
As we saw at the beginning of that clip. The government's so-called tough on crime policies are an abject failure. There are over 600 more new gang members, whereas they failed miserably to recruit police, which I'm happy about, don't get me wrong. Meth use has doubled over the last year. And just recently, over the last few weeks, we've seen numerous cases of police violence, of police misconduct, of police mistakes, of police actions that have led to people's death, to people's hospitalization, and to mistreatment of mentally ill people. And so to cover up for this massive failure, which is shown day after day in cases and in all the statistics that we have, they are attacking Tamatha Paul. Why? Because she is talking about alternatives to this failed tough on crime system. They don't want us to talk about alternatives. They don't even want us to dream of anything outside the current police and prison industrial complex. They want us to believe that this failure of a system that harms and traumatizes our communities is the only system that we can have. And they are deathly afraid that anyone might put the idea in our heads that, hold on, we might be able to do things differently, where we're not spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to put people in cages just so that they can commit crimes when they come out. Where we're not just beating people up for being brown or homeless or poor or disabled, where we actually care about what the evidence says and how to reduce crime.
Kia ora.
So that's why they're attacking Tamatha Paul.
And as well, you know, let's just be honest, it's coming from a young, attractive wahine Māori, and the Greens are gaining momentum.
Yeah.
So, you know, as you say, they have no other solutions. You know, how do you address crime? You address the roots of crime, the causes of crime. You address inequality. You address poverty. But that's not a conversation that they want to have, eh? Addressing poverty? No way, they can't go there. And because the Greens are starting to gain momentum, any time any of these alternative solutions that are looking into anything that's off the current trajectory needs to be stamped out immediately. Because it's people are talking about this. They have to talk about it as if you can never ever go there, and shame on you for even going there.
You can't even think about it.
Mm.
It's about narrowing the acceptable limits of conversation in this country. And they've said you're not allowed to talk about alternatives to policing. You're not allowed to talk about systemic racism. You're not allowed to talk about basic facts about our police and prison industrial complex because they reflect badly on the colony. And, you know, it's honestly, I don't know if I've seen such a united gang up on a politician before. And I think you're onto something. I think these right-wing, especially male white politicians, get irked by articulate and attractive young people. I don't know what it is. Maybe because attraction has its own form of power.
Absolutely.
And people are more likely to listen to articulate, attractive people. But they hate them. They hate them. They're always attacking, especially young, attractive women.
Because it's going to build momentum. You know, she is being looked at as a role model, and she has been looked at as a role model for a while now, even before she got into parliament. She does amazing mahi, and so her profile is building, which means her ideas are building. And I think if we look at all the statistics and where our rangatahi are voting, where they're looking in terms of looking for leadership, and, you know, this is nothing new or weird, but it's increasingly more progressive as we move, as time goes on. And the old guard that are desperate to keep the status quo and to hold on to what they currently have are scared shitless.
So why does Labour jumping in?
Why are they jumping? Well, like, they got nothing new. But also, I just want to say, like, Carmel, I think, we're going to play the video next, right?
We will.
But Carmel Sepuloni, she was the softest in terms of the condemnation that she had. Because she's a wahine. Because I think she gets it. The way that we all pile on our wahine, particularly brown or Māori or Pacifica wahine in parliament, is just outrageous. And so I thought it was interesting, her clip, you know, you could tell that they're telling her you need to condemn this, but she added a bit of her soft energy to it. And I think it speaks to what you're saying in terms of how it particularly is an issue for men and why they always are very quick to go into the ugly spaces. Because Hipkins,
let's talk about Hipkins.
He could have been softer. Like, often when things like this happen, you know, they're like, oh, not words I would have used.
Absolutely.
You know? But for this, he was like, oh, yeah, it's not good. Oh, actually, it was stupid. It was
When do you ever see them using language that strong about something that was said? Even the most outrageous, extremist, racist, blatant lies that come out from ACT, New Zealand First and National. Have you ever heard Labour calling their comments stupid?
Not that I recall.
So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And there was someone who made a really good thread about this on Twitter that you just reminded me of.
Yeah, I think, you know, they have no other solutions, right? Every time people like share their thoughts and perspectives about crime and, oh, what are we going to do? It's like, don't worry, we're training more police. We're doing more. We're gonna, you know, and they have been unsuccessful. So now the only thing that's left for them to do is to give police more powers, or, you know, just leave it up to citizens to do citizen arrests, you know, like they have no other solutions. So anyone, they have to jump on her, because the more that this idea is seen as legitimate, the more people are gonna bring it up. And I really encourage people, do bring it up. You know, there are so many, there are better ways to deal with the situation than just trying to get more police. I mean, if you have any friends who are trying to get into the police force, have some conversations with them. Maybe their time is better spent in some of these other organizations, like DCM, other organizations that are looking out for people. There are alternatives out there, but it is also one of those things, you know, we need to accept that there's a problem.
Yeah, they don't want us to get to that point.
So that we can properly start funding and exploring. Like, you know, we should have avenues where we're testing all sorts of things. We're not. Or if we are, it's not focused on enough. Because obviously where we're going, like nothing is working. Like all of the things you just rattled off before. Things are as bad as they've ever been.
So on that thread about, you know, Hipkins calling her stupid and also the comment about her being insane, Lily Leadbeater said on Twitter, you know, she called out Hipkins because he's been wrongfully arrested and took the police to court for that. And so she says, you know, you should be aware that cops can get it wrong. Then she says, you know, 10 out of 10 ableism from the leaders of both our major parties suggesting an MP is mentally ill and lacking intellect. She goes on, it's such a constant thing for young women to be told they're insane or stupid or emotional. For challenging and critiquing structures and behavior, I get it all the time, including for shit I've been paid to give advice and opinions on. It's 100% gaslighting. The reason it happens is to keep women down and for them to keep quiet. It's super fucking gross to see two older men do that to a younger woman, especially one who is wahine Māori, you know, the community disproportionately targeted by police, which is backed up by plenty of evidence. Think of all the dumb shit MPs have said over the years. When have the leaders of political parties been so aggressive in their criticism? Even shit that we all agree is wrong, you often get a, I wouldn't have taken that action or said that, or I'd have been more mindful of my words. You don't get leaders of parties calling the person stupid and insane. That's done to humble Tam. We should all critique the police and what they do. And then they go on to talk about issues with the police. So yeah, there's definitely aspects of misogyny and racism going on here in that it's normalized to attack people like her in our society, whereas it just simply wouldn't be acceptable for Chris Hipkins to come out and say, I don't know, Chris Luxon said something stupid, because you're meant to respect white, middle-aged, rich men. So there is an acceptability around bullying brown women that has made these politicians feel like it's okay to do that, and that's exact same thing that's happening with our media. They feel empowered to doing that because of pre-existing racism and misogyny in our communities.
Yeah, like with everything they say, you can hear that they're just talking to their constituents. You know?
Absolutely.
Like as you say, Hipkins isn't going to use strong language against, you know, another white male, Luxon, because then the voters are thinking, oh, Hipkins might turn around and use that language on me. But it's okay to use that language on the greenies.
Yeah. Yeah, they see that there is social acceptability for going there, hey? And yeah, just in terms of Labour jumping in on this, because they have the same policies, folks. Labour wants to keep the gang patch legislation, and look, Māori make up 83% of those charged under the new gang laws. Labour can't at the same time keep these racist gang laws and support what the Green Party is saying about the systemic racism
it makes no sense,
and abuse of the police. They have to pick a lane, and they've picked their lane. Their lane is that they're going to continue with this whole tough on crime narrative. They're going to continue with tough on crime policies. They're going to keep the gang patch legislation. You see them in the House attacking National all the time for not having enough police officers, for not being tough enough on gangs. So Labour's picked their lane, and it isn't to support alternatives to prison and police. And so therefore they have to attack the Greens and distance themselves from them. And these incredible activists at Peace Action Ōtautahi have been calling Hipkins out for it. So I just wanted to play a couple of these videos. They're quite satisfying. I'm very thankful for our young activists these days. They're onto it, all right. So I'll just get straight to it. He gets asked a couple of questions about this.
Like people feel less safe when they see more police are wrong.
I mean, I can personally say that I feel that way, and I know a lot of you know, brown people, out of women? Do you feel quite similar?
I think it is a very minority view, and
no pun intended.
You know, I think
So he thinks it's a minority view, but being a minority, first of all, where's the evidence that it's a minority view?
Yeah.
Secondly, even if it was a minority view, that doesn't mean A, that it's stupid, and it certainly does not mean that B, it doesn't exist. Tamatha Paul's job is to relay the opinions of her constituents, and you know, whether Hipkins likes it or not, these views exist in our society, and as much as he likes to call them stupid or pretend that they doesn't exist, it's not going to erase them. And then they uploaded another video.
A lot of ethnic minority communities do feel alienated by the
The New
police.
Zealand police is amongst the highest in the world.
Oh, mic drop.
Is amongst the highest in the world.
You made those comments around the police on the day that a disabled child was forcibly injected with antipsychotics by the police. I think it just really speaks to who the Labour Party views as their voter base, in that you're alienating.
On that very same day,
Hey, let me finish.
Critical of that action, said it was totally unacceptable.
Instead of stepping up and talking about the fact that the police, we have 11 times the rate of fatal shootings by police in New Zealand compared to England and Wales. The amount of police brutality complaints in New Zealand have doubled over the last 2 years. The ITCA is completely underfunded and is throwing out and investigating only 4% of complaints. Instead of bringing up any of those
4%.
points and trying to push for substantive change to support racial and gender minorities who are genuinely traumatized and experience brutality at the hands of police, you just doubled down and joined in a kind of right-wing coalition and condescending.
If you think that you're going to get progress on any of those issues by alienating the majority of the population, I disagree with you.
So that's quite an interesting admission from Hipkins, that it's not necessarily about whether the statements are accurate or not. It's about whether he thinks it's going to alienate voters or not. So, he's willing to sacrifice truth and representation to get majority votes. And I think that pretty much sums up Labour, don't you think?
Yeah. It's gaslighting, eh? Like, it's well, that's a minority view. It's still a view. And yeah, I mean, you already said it before, but it's so, like, a lot of us, I have this feeling for sure, when I see police, it's like seeing the military, we've all seen videos of police violence, all of the things that we've just heard recently in terms of misconduct by the police, breaking the jaw of a 15-year-old, beating up a kaumātua in prison. Well, that was corrections staff, to be fair, but still state violence. And all of these things, the carrying of weapons, and I may not necessarily be fearful or scared or worried for my own safety. I'm normally thinking about others when I'm out in the community. Like when I was in Wellington, in Pōneke, working for DCM, an organization that Tamatha brings up, I'd always walk the streets, and when I saw cops, I would immediately myself look around, and I would see, okay, where's someone who might need some assistance, because I don't want the cops assisting these people. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, and yeah, it's just so gaslighty for him to talk in that way. And I think you make a great point that, he was calling it stupid before, and almost like he wanted to say that she's incorrect. But no, he's just saying what his constituents want to hear. And he's willing to totally disregard her point, almost to say that it doesn't exist or shouldn't exist, just to please his own constituents. Very sad. And the way that he speaks to the rangatahi in that video that we just played, it's very clear that, like you say, he's picked his lane. He's not talking to her in a tone that is going to build a bridge with this individual or anything. He's basically like, here, I'm going to give it to you. This is it. Take it or leave it. I don't really care about what you're saying. As he says, he's like, I disagree. Yeah. And it's just like, oh, and he's like, I want to leave it at that. We can move on, please.
Yeah. Yeah. And, him saying it's a minority view, it's just really concerning to view minority views as irrelevant in our society. That's how you get tyranny of the majority, right? I mean, if the majority of people supported the Treaty Principles Bill, does that mean we should let it go to referendum and pass? No. Truth is truth. Facts are facts. And tyranny of majority is a real thing. And I feel like, you know, in terms of how Maori, Pacifica, mentally ill, disabled people and poor people are treated by police and prisons, they are actually experiencing the tyranny of the majority already, because their views are already not taken into account in terms of how we do policing and imprisonment in this country. And for him to double down and push them even further to the margins, I think is reprehensible. But that is exactly what he and our media outlets and other politicians are doing. Just look at the amount of articles and stories about Tamatha Paul. It is absolutely ridiculous. Other people have pointed out that, you know, Tim Jago didn't get this many articles, and the ACT Party sent the victims to their godmother's law firm. They didn't get this many articles about the fact that they've been allowing a culture of sexual abuse and harassment of young people within the ACT Party. They didn't get this many articles about so many extremely harmful things. And I think the most relevant comparison in this case is that they didn't write this many articles about the current harms that people are experiencing at the hands of police.
Kia ora.
And the current law changes that they're trying to push through in that space, which I think is the main reason that they're attacking Tamatha right now. But we'll get to that in a second. I wanted to jump through some of these articles and just look at the ridiculous bad faith arguments that they're applying. In this one case, Green Party Tamatha Paul can't back up claim that a person was jailed for $12 theft. But then you read the article and you find out that that's very misleading. She went into a prison. That was a story that she was told from someone. She didn't make her prove it. She didn't make this prisoner prove that this is what's happening. Interesting old as photo that they found of Tamatha looking disgruntled. Doesn't even have to have tattoos there or anything. Must be old. So she heard the story from this woman about the $12. They're asking her, can you prove that that's what happened, that she had no prior convictions? And Tamatha was like, no, I can't prove that. But
gotcha.
yeah, and that was how the article framed it. But she actually put on her stories that she told them of 3 other instances provided by a lawyer of people being jailed for similarly small events such as shoplifting for $12, and that they didn't include these examples in the article. So extremely bad faith argument. And you know, even if this woman had prior convictions, that doesn't justify her being put in prison for shoplifting $12. So regardless of how you look at it, it's not a gotcha moment. The next bad faith attack, this one's even, it's just as ridiculous, but social groups respond to Green MP Tamatha Paul saying they told her of police throwing away homeless items, and they tried to frame it like there was some sort of disagreement. So Tamatha Paul said that DCM, which is a place that Peter used to work at when we used to live in Wellington, and the Salvation Army, they went to them and asked them, like, did you really tell Tamatha Paul that this is how police were treating homeless people? Now, Salvation Army, they confirmed. They said, yes, one of our workers said that to her. The DCM, they responded politely, and all they said in their response was like, to be clear, we have not made a formal complaint to Tamatha Paul. Not saying that no worker told her about this experience, just that they hadn't made a formal complaint. And the media is trying to twist that as if somehow Tamatha Paul was misrepresenting DCM.
Yeah.
But you just know that DCM, one of their workers told Tamatha Paul that this is how they've been treating homeless people, and Tamatha Paul relayed that information to the public.
Yeah.
They didn't need to make a formal complaint. It was just a conversation.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, when I was working for DCM in Pōneke, I wanted to get to our clients before the police did. And, you know, police were urged to be very mindful when they were walking into our facility, our DCM facility. And even here up in, you know, at Waitangi, they had many unmarked police officers dispersed amongst, and for the Hikoi, I believe as well, unmarked officers. And when we do a lot of actions up here in Te Taitokero and there is some police presence, they usually come unmarked because we know what it's like. We know our people in terms of how they perceive the state. And particularly people who use the services of DCM, those individuals are often people who have been blacklisted from other groups. They've been shut out from other groups because they are essentially the most at-risk individuals in Te Whanganui Atara. So it is not at all, and I cannot speak for DCM. Of course, I haven't worked there for a couple years now, but when I was on the ground with them, all of our individuals there had very strong opinions about the police and how they engaged with our people, because they just simply didn't have the relationship expectations, you know, the ability to see these people as real humans and real individuals. They would often make situations worse. Of course, there are tight relationships, I should say, with DCM and the police, and instances where they work very, very well together. But it doesn't change the fact that, yes, people have their perceptions of police. You know, the relationships can be good between DCM and police, but it's about what the people are thinking, how they're feeling, and what they're saying. And absolutely, those who are on the bottom, in terms of our social hierarchy, they hate the cops. Come on, they hate the cops. And they're still people. Of course, they're voters, you know. Their opinion matters. To Chippy, it's a minority opinion, but to speak so dismissively of the representation of those constituents, it's unparliamentarian, you know. It's
and
a leader has to represent all of us, and he's not making that space that he needs to.
No, and you know what's interesting about all of this is that, you know, the Herald and the news, and when they're talking about this idea that police are stealing homeless people's belongings and chucking them in the trash, we don't hear from homeless people.
Oh, of course.
But they're people. They have opinions. They have voices. You can literally go up to them and ask them how they feel about the police. So instead of going to X, Y, and Z, any random Tom, Dick, and Harry to ask for their opinion, you could directly ask the people who are being impacted by the police, are they throwing your stuff in the trash? Do you feel safe with cops around them? These people are completely erased from the conversation. Like, bless DCM and the Salvation Army for the work they do, and they represent homeless people well, but no one can represent a person better than themselves.
Exactly.
And they're just completely erased from this conversation. Okay. Next we've got, whoops. Oh yeah, just one more attack. This is Barry Soper, who's a News Talk ZB senior political correspondent. Green MP Tamatha Paul's outburst shows Helen Clark was right about the Greens. And then he goes on this massive, again, really misogynistic rant, I would say, because he goes on, you know, the words that he uses for her are, you know, she says that she's having a rant. He says that she's, you know, had a recent rush of blood to her head. He called it her outpouring. You know, there's lots of words like that that make her sound like she's overly emotional. And for the few things I wanted to raise from this article. One, they say her recent rush of blood to her head, where where she suggested most of the people in our prisons are poor unfortunates who steal a loaf of bread to feed their family, rather than the truth that the violent and sexual offenders make up most of our prison population. So that's actually incorrect. So he himself is telling mistruths as he's trying to catch Tamatha Paul out. It's actually around 50-50. in terms of violent and non-violent offences of people in prison. So for him to say that the majority of people are there for violent and sexual crimes, it's just inaccurate. So the irony, these people, they're allowed to criticize Tamatha Paul for saying things that are actually not incorrect, but then themselves put out lies, but no one says anything or cares about them because they're on the right wing. He also went at her for standing up for this kaumātua who was beaten up in prison, and I think this is really strange. He says she recently visited Waikato's Spring Hill prison, where one of the country's most notorious prisoners, Dean Whitcliffe, was, keyword was, incarcerated. Calling him a kaumātua. Oh, how could she? Paul urged the corrections minister to intervene and free him before he died of a hunger strike. Decades before she was born, Whitcliffe walked into a jewellery shop in her Wellington Central electorate and shot dead the owner of a pistol.
With a pistol. Mm-hmm.
With a pistol. So he's trying to criticize her for standing up for this kaumātua who was beaten up and hospitalized by prison guards, who has already done his time for this crime that he talks about in terms of shooting someone in a jewellery shop.
Yeah.
He's done his sentence. The sentence is finished. The issue is that he breached his parole by sleeping in a car for being homeless and not being able to sleep at the specified address. They criminalized him for being homeless. They put him in prison, and then they beat him up bloody and hospitalized him. And this guy is trying to imply that Tamatha Paul is wrong for standing up for him and for calling him a kaumātua. That's a really strange thing that the right wing often do.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to think that you can only use kaumātua for certain old people.
Yeah, like a rangatira.
Yeah.
But that's a rangatira, Yeah. I mean, it's just because we have high respect for our elders in Te Ao Māori. So it's just natural that we would, that people are assigning some type of status to the word kaumātua. And I suppose there is some status there, but it's just inherent, I suppose, that all of our old people, all of our kaumātua, it's just we have reverence for our elderly. So it's not abnormal at all to refer to them as that.
Totally. And yeah, he just keeps going, and yeah, have a look if you want to, get annoyed at this, just yet another racist white man using misogynistic language to attack this wahine Māori.
Speaking to his constituents.
Absolutely. And then he criticizes the Greens for asking Luxon about the benefits of privatizing public services and how that creates the middleman and the profit that they make being at the expense of taxpayer money. And he makes out like this is, again, stupid, ridiculous, outrageous. So you can see where they're coming from in terms of their attacks on the Greens.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, in general, they're terrified about them criticizing the status quo. And finally, this is my last example. Andrew Dickens from News Talk ZB again. Tamatha Paul shares complaints of 1, not 100. So he says in this article that she's in the extreme minority view, again, like Chris Hipkins. But not only is this not true, this is not the opinion of 1, it's not even the opinion of 100. Look at how many likes Tamatha Paul's video has amassed in just 2 days on TikTok. 21,000 likes. And by the way, that's a massive ratio. It's only had 137,000 views. So that shows that it's more popular than even normal popular videos on TikTok.
That's very good.
People really like what she's saying. You see in the comments, it's New Zealanders. It's a lot of New Zealanders in the comments. They relate to the experiences she's putting out there. These people are real, they exist, they've had these experiences. I also just think the comments are hilarious. Look, search Jenna Lynch, because so many people in the comments made a note about Jenna Lynch being an Axe Party affiliate that now it just comes up thanks to AI at the top. Oh yeah, that's the first thing. Daily reminder that Jenna Lynch is married to the Axe Party. And then you go down. Everyone absolutely loves it. You answered more questions than the Prime Minister this year.
Yeah, she smashed. She smashed in this interview, and Jenna Lynch is like stuttering because I guess it's almost like Jenna Lynch ran out of questions because she was trying to catch her out or something, but she was like, oh shit, that was a great answer. I better try and move on and catch her on something else. So good job, Tamatha. Really amazing interview. Well done. Well done.
Yep, that's just one person liking 21,000 times.
Yeah, that's what they would think, right? It's Tamatha.
It's just
It's
Tamatha.
Chloe. Just
Yep, making all these accounts and liking it. So yeah, these people, they can be in denial as much as they want, that this conversation is not going away. You know, like I heard Angela Davis talking about this last year or the year before. She was saying, you know, when she started talking about prison abolition, no one was talking about that at all. And now it's a pretty fairly common discussion to come up on the left and among leftists, and among activists. And that normalization of that kōrero is not going to go away. This conversation is going to continue because we can see with our eyes, with our experience, and with all the data that the current police and prison industrial complex is not working. So naturally, we're going to seek alternatives. So if they think that they can bully and intimidate this conversation out of public consciousness, they've got another thing coming.
they're gonna have to fix their problems if they want this conversation to go away. Because as you say, we're having the conversations because of the blatantly failing system that's in front of us. So yeah, it's gonna keep coming up.
Okay, so now that we've kind of looked at the attacks on Tamatha Paul, the bad faith arguments, and the pile-on by racist or likely racist white
Allegedly
middle-aged men.
racist.
Allegedly. Let's look at some actual evidence, some actual data, and some actual professionals on the matter. Is Tamatha Paul in La La Land? Here's what the evidence says. And this is written by 3 criminologists, okay? So people who know what they're talking about. And I wanted to read a little part of it because I think they really nailed it in terms of what's going on, in terms of the narrowing of the conversations that we're allowed to have.
Yeah.
So they say, when politicians criticize Paul for sharing her constituents' views of the police, they're attempting to render those opinions inexpressible. It's worth considering whose voices get to be heard in public and whose voices are categorically dismissed. Research conducted in West Auckland showed that different communities held different opinions on policing. Pākehā communities were indeed found to support increased police patrols, but Māori and Pacific people overwhelmingly preferred other justice measures. Now, why do they say that? Why is that the case? The case is because Māori and Pacific are overrepresented in terms of policing and abuse by the police. I forgot to read a part, sorry. Criminologists began collecting evidence that New Zealand police engaged in racist discrimination decades ago. Last year's Understanding Police Delivery report, co-produced by researchers and the police themselves, so the police know that they have systemic bias.
On that point, sorry to interrupt, but yeah, maybe it has come out, but have there been statements from police leadership groups about Tamatha's comments?
Good question.
Whether they've condemned them or...
I'm not
maybe
sure,
we should
only
look
about
into that,
Mark Mitchell,
Come back.
who is the police minister.
Oh, it does not count.
But that doesn't count. But police themselves know. They have replaced Costa though, so maybe their new guy is less likely to be honest.
Right.
But that review was done under Costa's watch, and it was extremely comprehensive. And and we'll get into it a bit on. It detailed with so many examples using camera footage and so on that there has been instances of racism, and unexplained racism and bias that Māori and Pacifica face that can't be explained by like how strong their crime was or prior convictions. So there is a difference in how they're treated by the police, even if you take all the other factors away. So they say, yeah, this report affirmed that this discrimination continues into the present. Māori are around 7 times more likely than Pākehā to be victims of police violence. 7 times more likely. This reality affects how the communities Paul represents perceive the police. They and she have a right to share that perception. And that's when they say that they're trying to render those opinions inexpressible. We're not allowed to say our truth. And then they tell us to think about whose views are allowed to be expressed in society. And if, you know, it's as if One News wanted to prove them just 100% correct, because they went on and went around and asked the public what they thought of Tamatha Paul's comments, and take a look at who they chose to interview.
The public feels safer.
I think what she said was silly.
I just hope by the time she's 30, she's grown up and far more responsible.
Oh, she can say what she likes, but she's totally insane.
The Royal Minister's just said to media down in Blenheim that you're totally insane because of your views on police. What do you make of that?
He's entitled to his own views, but I think they are legitimate. I've had a massive response in the last 24 hours of people saying the same thing, and that a lot of people do not feel safe or protected by the police.
The Green Party are in complete la-la land.
I think the Prime Minister's extremely privileged. He hasn't had the same upbringing as I have. He hasn't been over-policed like I have in a community like Tokoroa.
So we asked the public if foot patrols made them feel safer.
Gosh, yes, way safer.
Yeah?
Absolutely.
Why?
Because I just know, well, you're just brought up to know that there's safe people.
Yeah, police presence always good, cleans things up, yeah.
Definitely.
Definitely feel safer?
Yes, I think so. It's nice to see them about.
I'm a law-abiding citizen. I have no problem with them at all. Some of my best friends are policemen.
Others, though, see police differently.
Maybe kind of scared,
Probably less safe. If anything, it's more intimidating.
Tamatha Paul has also accused police of recently mistreating the homeless in Wellington.
Beat patrol policers were using their resources to pack homeless people's stuff up and put it in the bin.
The police didn't respond to questions. This advocate says homeless people often feel harassed.
For a lot of our young people, their experience of the police is not an experience that brings a lot of safety or care. It's an experience where they feel that they are often marginalised and targeted instead of looked after.
The Greens, calling it as they see it.
There is systemic bias and systemic racism within our police, and somehow it's a problem that I'm bringing that up in this place.
The under fire MP sticking to her guns. Benedict Collins, One News.
So, firstly, it's hard to not notice the fact that they didn't interview a single Māori and Pacifica, the two groups that are disproportionately victimized by police violence and imprisonment. And it's also notable who they chose to center in terms of the views of the people who support it. So we had the First Lady saying, of course I feel safe with police. I was brought up to see the police as safe. Okay, so what are we contrasting that to? We're contrasting that to people who have a different upbringing. They're not normal Kiwis. They're being brought up in the wrong way. That's the implication. And then the second note that I've got here is that second guy came up and he said, oh, yeah, police do a great job of cleaning up our city.
Right.
And, you know, this is language that we see colonizers often use against Indigenous people. In its most extreme, you know, we see it with ethnic cleansing. And that term actually derived from the colonizers themselves. And then it became known as the term that we understand that process of forced displacement. But it was initially seen as a positive thing to perform ethnic cleansing. And so this idea of cleansing, it's really tied in with colonization, genocide, and the idea that there are certain undesirables in our community that we want to just erase. We want to just get a little eraser and rub them out of society. And that's exactly what prison does. It doesn't resolve the underlying issues, the trauma, the addiction, etc. It just erases these people from society. And so I do think it's interesting that they chose to include those examples and that language. And then for the people who are saying that they feel unsafe around the police, they only included 2 people, and they were both young. And I think, again, they're trying to build up this association that it's a stupid thought to have, or a silly or a childish thought to have. And, you know, I find it hard to believe that they couldn't find any older person who said that I don't feel safe around the police. I find it hard to believe they couldn't find any respectable looking, you know, brown man or woman on the street to give the whakaaro that in an articulate way of why police make them feel unsafe. And I just
there was that Indian guy.
Right, but he was in the first group who felt safe around the police, and he's from a demographic that doesn't brush up with those police. He's not poor, he's not Māori or Pacifica, he's not a drug addict, you know. So it's and that's where you go with them pitching immigrants against Māori and Pacifica again, right? And they often do that. That's why, you know, they've got like the Dairy Association lead is that Indian guy, and he's always coming up saying, oh, these people are attacking our stores, and then they show you pictures of brown people. It's this constant pitting against each other. And that's when we need to clarify that there are things going on here. It's not just about your brown skin. It's about class. It's about colonization. It's about disposition from your land and trauma that passes down through your generations. These are things that might not be experienced by immigrants who come here, especially when they make it so that you have to be quite well off to be able to migrate to New Zealand. So that means your immigrants are going to be more likely to be from that higher class of society. So that was the news, interviewing the public. Oh, and just to reiterate the point. So again, they brought in Aaron Hendry, who's a great advocate for homeless people and other vulnerable communities on the street. But again, not interviewing the homeless people themselves. Even though this is a conversation about homeless people. Like, I want to know how they feel about having the little belongings that they have being chucked in the trash and having to sleep without a sleeping bag. I want to hear it from their mouth, and then for us to understand, oh, that's why they feel unsafe around the police. I mean, it'll just go ding, ding, ding in our brains if we hear it.
Yeah, they don't want us to have that ding, ding, ding. It's like they're like, oh no, of course they're going to say that they support Tamatha's kōrero 100%. They're just like, oh no, it's for sure that they're going to say that. Yeah. Therefore, we don't need to show their opinion at all.
But then how can you justify bringing on Retail NZ lady, another white, rich business lady that came on just before that clip that we played to say, oh, we totally love Beat Police. It's so great for businesses. Well, I can guarantee that Retail NZ's going to say that, but they bring them on anyway. And
I guess they had Aaron Hendry as their kind of both sides sing it kind of thing. But yeah, let's just hear it straight from the individuals themselves. And that's why I want to hear more from the police themselves as well. Like, they know what's going on. Our police know what's going on, as you said with that report before that they were involved with. So yeah, let's hear it directly from those who are involved the most, but we don't. So like, you know, how are we supposed to learn the objective facts of the situation if the media aren't going to present them to us?
There is another interesting thing about the conversations, which is that they're talking about whether this makes people feel safer or not. The whole conversation is about how people feel.
Mm-hmm.
They're not talking about whether it reduces crime or not, because the proof is in the pudding.
Oh, yeah.
The crime is not reducing.
Yeah.
So all they've got to fall back on is whether it makes people feel safer or not. And now we're even challenging that usefulness of it, which leaves them with zero usefulness.
Yeah. And that's the thing that Luxon promised, right? He didn't say, oh, we're going to see a reduction in crime and ram raids or whatever. We're going to see, you know, we're not even going to need to do boot camps because crime is going to be so low. No, what he said and what he promised is that people are going to feel safer, which is really unmeasurable. Really, and you know, they're just going to come at us with a whole bunch of anecdotal stories from people like the demographics that we saw, those first 3 individuals who don't interact with police. And those are the people that we need to hear from. like the opinions of other people, to be honest, should be weighted a lot less. Those who are engaging the most with police should have their opinions weighted, if anything. But it seems like they've run in the complete opposite direction, especially the way that Chris Hipkins is talking. He's talking as if these opinions should never, ever be expressed. But if something is impacting a particular demographic more than any other demographic, then those are the ones that we should center. And those are the ones that we should, you know, put on these boards and whatnot for exploring better alternatives. Like, we should be funneling everything into their perspectives and opinions and putting them in the spaces to explore these potential alternatives. But we seem to be going in the complete opposite direction.
Yeah, and that's what this article talks about. Like, this cannot be a monocultural monologue, that the people that Paul is speaking for are a part of the public too, Hipkins, and their opinions are at least as important as those of the business owners and politicians who have tried to shut them down. It's fairly obvious they're the most impacted group. I just want to show this. This is not a new thing that Tamatha Paul is saying. It's actually extremely common. And here's another example. The chief ombudsman, he said some really similar stuff to Tamatha Paul, but like, you know, in white man speak. And no one's attacking him for it. Listen to this.
Well, we've got to ask why and what we are doing wrong as a country. This doesn't just happen by accident. We must have to have a relook at what we are doing with offending, how it should be treated. There are so many things in the justice system that need to be looked at from the very beginning, and corrections, of course, is just the end result. So the whole of the justice sector, I think, should be more cohesive, and I'm strong about this. There should almost be a whole-of-life look at a prisoner right at the very, very beginning. Do they need to be remanded in custody? What are the other avenues for their bail and their care? Right through to, is there another option other than imprisonment? I'd love it if we could refresh our attitude. Well,
He's basically saying we need to look at alternatives for imprisonment. And, you know, confirms that there is structural bias against Māori. And I didn't see any articles attacking him. Did you see Hipkins calling him stupid?
No. Now, just to share a little corridor, my dad has been a prison warden for a long time. He's coming up to 20 years as a prison warden. Hopefully he doesn't mind me sharing this corridor. But he actually, the majority of issues that he ran into as a corrections officer was with other staff members. He got on swimmingly with the inmates, but his main issue that he had was with other staff members and how they treated inmates. And of course, he made comments to me about how there's the recidivism rates need to be looked at, and that's what this ombudsman is talking about as well. And that the lack of rehabilitation and support for people's reintegration into society is, you know, the corrections industry is absolutely failing in those places. But I just think it's interesting from my father's perspective that the main issue he had while he's been working for so long in corrections has been with staff members instead of inmates.
Yeah. And he's also told me about how he sees these intergenerational problems of people in prison and then their child ending up in prison, and, you know, their grandparent was in prison and they're just stuck in this cycle. And you don't see anything meaningful from our government to try and break that cycle for these families. And that's because they actually rely on them to fail in our society, to remain an underclass in our society, for capitalism to be able to maintain its hold, for them to fulfill those low-paid jobs, for them to be unemployed and fulfill the unemployment quota they need to keep wages down, and so on and so forth. And so they don't want to resolve the issue. That's why they're attacking Tamatha. But, and this is quite late in the game for me to say, I think this is the main reason that Tamatha Paul is being attacked right now. The timing of these attacks on Tamatha Paul are not accidental. So right now, as you're seeing this pylon on Tamatha Paul, the government is passing laws that will keep people in prison longer and that will give police more powers, that will inevitably result in greater abuse of those powers and greater victimization of especially our vulnerable communities. One of these laws is the new sentencing laws, which are going to drive our already high imprisonment rates and budgets even higher. And they say the new legislation essentially limits how much judges can reduce a prison sentence for mitigating factors such as guilty plea, young age, or mental ability. A regulatory impact statement from the Ministry of Justice estimated it would result in 1,350 more people in prison. Now, from the Law Society submission, they're hardly a radical group. They say that the bill's proposals, in our view, risk undermining essential elements of the New Zealand criminal justice system, which relies on flexibility and adaptability of judicial proceedings. Sentencing decisions are inherently complex, reflecting unique circumstances. The bill's measures seem to encroach upon this judicial discretion, potentially leading to more restrictive systems that could limit the court's ability to achieve justice. And then later on in the article, at paragraph 46, they say, research consistently shows that prisons are ineffective in addressing the root causes of crime, such as poverty, addiction, and mental health issues. According to the Ministry of Justice, the bill is projected to add approximately 1,350 individuals to an already constrained prison system, which could further strain resources and diminish the justice system's ability to provide meaningful rehabilitative support. Community-based alternatives, such as home detention and restorative justice, have been shown to reduce recidivism rates and are more cost-effective than incarceration. The Law Society Parole Committee urges the government to prioritize these community-based sentencing options, which support offender rehabilitation and align with broader social objectives, rather than increasing the reliance on incarcerations. So they're saying everything Tamatha Paul is bloody saying, isn't she? that prisons aren't good for rehabilitation and that we have alternatives that have been proven to work. For example, home detention and restorative justice, they actually reduce recidivism rates. They cost us less than putting them in these dungeons, which, as Tamatha Paul highlighted in an incredible speech in the House, it costs the government over $100,000 for each individual in prison, whereas they're spending about $1,000 per prison when it comes to our health and education sector.
Yeah, crazy. It's cheaper just to give people, like, I guess that's kind of what we're saying, right? When we're saying, let's resource our communities to be able to deal with these things ourselves. Like, let's resource hapu. Like here in Ngāpuhi, we have the prison here at Ngāwha. There are community groups dying to be resourced so that we can start using our own tikanga for rehabilitation. $100,000 per person per year. That's crazy. That's like, you could...
It was more than that. I can't remember the exact figure, but yeah.
Like, we're on less than that, the both of us, So, I mean, like, the good that could be done if we got rid of the prison industrial complex and divvied out that money to community organizations, hapu or not, to community organizations to be implementing these alternatives, it would just be so amazing. The potential is really quite incredible. I think a lot of people struggle to think about alternatives to prison, alternatives to police, but then if we can grasp how much money is being wasted, how much money is being funneled into that space and then essentially flushed down the toilet and then repeated, if we're not improving recidivism rates and it's a failing system, then we're just on an endless self-destructive loop, eating our own tail, and it's getting tighter and tighter and tighter as things go on. And so, I just think it's there is potential there. With that amount of cost, it's just insane.
It's clear. I mean, you can, if you just spend that amount of money just housing and looking after the mental health of a person, you will have way better outcomes in terms of they're healing and they're reoffending, but you know, and anyone who looks into the evidence comes out with the same conclusion. But this government and successive governments are not interested in the evidence because, in my opinion, they want to maintain that underclass. So they don't want to resolve these issues that the Law Society is talking about. And they go on to say that, of course, the bill's restrictions on sentence reductions and cumulative sentencing are likely to disproportionately impact Māori, who are significantly overrepresented in the prison population. And that's just that just goes without saying for any increased police or imprisonment, that it's going to disproportionately impact the people who are disproportionately impacted by these things. And so the government is currently trying to pass a law that's going to result in more imprisonment, especially of Māori. And instead of talking about this, the media is just simply talking about Tamatha's wording. I could only find this one article. This is the only article, and it was just posted yesterday.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the conversation is it's like an oceanic, like Australia, New Zealand news reporter as well.
Oh, right.
So not a totally like Aotearoa centric news provider doing this story. Pretty sure.
Yeah,
pretty
and
sure.
it didn't make it on One News at 6 p.m. I don't know if it made it on 3 News, but they were discussing this in the House this week. And so as they're discussing, kapai, yeah, so that's interesting, right? No New Zealand-based media outlet has even so much as written an article about this week's law changes.
Tisk.
And they're massive. I mean, they're estimated lock up over 1,300 people who are most likely to be Māori and mentally ill and disabled. So this is such a huge, consequential piece of legislation, way more consequential than simply words, I might add. For example, Tamatha's words. Right? She's just saying words. She's not even in government. She's not writing policies or laws. Compare that with someone with the government that's actually passing actual genuine laws that are actually going to impact people in the real life. This is a way more important, way bigger story. And this is exactly why they're attacking Tamatha Paul right now. Because this week they're passing more tough on crime measures, and we've seen how badly they failed with the meth statistics and the gang statistics and the crime statistics.
And the boot camps. Oh, failure.
And the boot camps. All of these things have failed, and yet they want to do more of them, and they don't want to talk about it. So what are they going to do? They're going to talk about Tamatha Paul instead. So the timing of it, family. Anytime you see a pylon like this, it's not random. It just didn't come out of anywhere. There's a reason for it. It's timed with the same exact moment that the government is passing more tough on crime policies. This isn't the only law, by the way. There's another one that they're passing right now, and it's the changes to drug driving testing. So they want to bring in this new law. I thought I had hold on a second, just before I play that. Oh, here it is. So let's just watch this little RNZ video about these new drug testing changes that they're bringing in.
Being it past its third and final reading in Parliament. This means police will have power to undertake random roadside saliva tests similar to drink driving. The legislation was supported by National, ACT, New Zealand First and Labour. The Greens and Te Pāti Māori did not support the bill. Police are proposing to use a device that can test for cocaine, THC, methamphetamine and MDMA. Drivers who return a positive result will have their sample sent for further testing. If that test finds qualifying drugs and indicates recent use, the driver will face a fine and demerit points. However, 2 positive roadside tests are required before a 12-hour driving ban is enforced. Motorists will be able to challenge the result after an infringement notice has been issued, but they will have to pay a private analyst for an oral fluid sample examination. The roadside testing is expected to be rolled out in December this year, with the government wanting police to undertake 50,000 tests a year. A bill allowing...
Okay, so Labour supported this bill, which is, again, another terrible bill that will only serve to further traumatize our communities. Why? Because the technology that they're going to use is extremely shoddy. And Chloe Swarbrick brings this up in the comment. It's extremely inaccurate. They will catch people and say that they're positive when they haven't actually consumed any drugs, or the drugs could already be in their system and they're no longer impaired and it can still catch it, or it might let people off who are in fact impaired. Then there's the fact that you get tested, they find that you're impaired, then you can't drive for 12 hours. So it might be wrong. Oh, and by the way, it's can detect pharmaceutical drugs.
Right, like there can be a complication, a clash.
Yes.
It seems just like it's
just a shoddy technology.
Shoddy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so and they've done it in Australia, and that's what they've had. They've had that people on certain prescription medication have been caught by this, and then you are not able to drive for 12 hours, and then you have to pay to get tested, and then you have to waste your time to challenge that in court. So we know that poor people are not going to be able to do that. So if you're poor and you've been wrongly caught by this machine, either because you're on prescription medication or because it just got it wrong, you might not be able to afford to challenge that, and then it's on your name, it's on your record, and you have to go through the hassle of challenging it. But also, even if you were able to do all of that, you lose your ability to drive for 12 hours. That could in itself be extremely harmful to someone, for a family, for example, who relies on someone driving.
Kilda. It's just, I don't know what's going on here, but Chloe Swarbrick's comment is hidden.
Yeah.
Hidden by Instagram. I don't know if y'all can see that. So, I mean, there's a lot of likes on it. It's got about half the amount of likes on the post itself, but strange. Hidden by Instagram. You have to scroll to the very bottom of the comment section to actually find this comment by Chloe Swarbrick. Used to be at the very top. I don't know what is in here that would have been triggered. Maybe the word drugs, but it's definitely triggering my conspiracy theory that the social media giants are colluding with our parliamentarians. But
yeah, she doesn't say any keywords that I would think would get flagged. So I don't know what's going on. Absolutely. Oh, yeah, exactly. Medical cannabis, and the fact that it stays in your system. Cannabis stays in your system.
I suppose for medical cannabis, you'd be able to prove that you know all of these prescription.
I think you still can't drive on it.
All of these types of prescription. Yeah, but like you say, it can stay in your system for a really long time.
That's the problem. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's shoddy. Yeah, we need to see more details.
So let's look at the submission by the New Zealand.
Sorry.
Let's look at the submission by the New Zealand Drug Foundation. They say it all, and you know, again, not a radical group. E te whānau. They do want to, more than any other organisation in the country, New Zealand Drug Foundation, sorry, I think I said their name wrong before, want to reduce drug harm in this country. And this is what they say about this law that, again, Labour supported, okay? And so, you know, just again to reiterate, that's why they have to attack Tamatha Paul for talking about the harms of policing, because they themselves are supporting further policing of our communities. And this is what the New Zealand Drug Foundation says. We heartily support efforts to deter drug driving and reduce the harm caused on our roads. However, this bill is based on imperfect science. Saliva tests do not test for impairment, and for most drugs, it's impossible to set accurate threshold limits for impairment. Under the proposed methodology, false negatives and positives are inevitable, meaning some people will be penalized unfairly and others will be sent on their way despite being unfit to drive. We would prefer a model that streamlines the existing compulsory impairment testing, making it more appealing for police to carry out at checkpoints alongside alcohol testing. Alongside this, we would like to see efforts made to develop some kind of portable technology that could accurately test for impairment for any cause. They go on. It's worrying that we do not have robust data on the extent to which drug driving contributes to road accidents or deaths in New Zealand, nor as to whether the problem is increasing or to what rate. They say, so we can't respond to the issue when we don't have the data. And then finally, they say we're concerned about equity issues resulting from the ability to test people without cause and recommend testing take place alongside roadside checkpoints only, where it can be applied to all drivers without the need to exercise discretion about who takes the test. This is a really important point. Roadside checkpoints, they're able to use a more reliable technology in terms of testing people's drug impairment. And secondly, they remove the discretionary aspect.
Right.
Police are not just going to pull over any brown or poor looking person anymore, because we know that this is going to be applied unequally. You just know that there's going to be rich people driving in their expensive cars, high off their heads on expensive drugs, and they're never going to be caught because the police is just not going to profile them as criminals in their heads. Meanwhile, there's going to be a whole bunch of poor people who may have smoked weed the night before who get stopped by the police, harassed, and potentially result in being unable to drive with a charge on their name. So I think that, that's a really good point that I hadn't thought about before, but checkpoints remove the ability to profile people. And I just think it's really interesting and telling that the government doesn't want checkpoints. They want these discretionary tests because they don't want to capture their rich mates. I reckon, they only want the police to apply unequally. So
yeah, and like you say, say if you had a spliff the night before and now they've pulled you over, now you just have to go through this process with them, and it's just putting our vulnerable people in engagement with the police. And the more our vulnerable people engage with police, the more chance that they're going to be further profiled. The longer a vulnerable person spends with a police officer, the longer you drag out that time and that engagement, the higher the risk for that individual is. So anything like this, from the outset, you may not be able to see the harm, but increasing that time that our vulnerable people are going to have with the police is problematic, because it's just giving a greater chance for, like you say, racial profiling or anything like that.
absolutely. And so we've got these two laws currently being passed in the House that are going to really seriously harm, traumatize, and lock our poor communities in that cycle of imprisonment and policing. And our media is talking about Tamatha Paul. At the same time, over just the past few weeks, we've had numerous cases of abject failure of the police. We've had an 11-year-old being misidentified, abducted, handcuffed, and injected with antipsychotics when they were meant to be responding to a mental health issue. We had them beating up that 77-year-old Copaganda and imprisoning him for being homeless. We had a car chase that resulted in the death of someone. We had them tasering and releasing a dog on someone who ended up dying as a result of that. I mean, I would call that state-sanctioned murder. You have meth use. It's risen 96% in the last year. Let's bring that up from the government's own data. 2024 saw an unprecedented 96% increase in methamphetamine consumption when compared to 2023.
Crazy. So nearly a doubling.
Nearly a double. We have boot camps being an abject failure. So we got 10 participants. One of them tragically died in a car accident. 2 of them escaped. 2 have been arrested, and 1 left the program. And in the first official evaluation from the government's youth boot camp, they said that there was reoffending that occurred, but they refused to give RNZ the specific details of how many or what was the reoffending. But RNZ is trying to seek more information. And they also noted weaknesses such as too few staff to give enough hours of individual clinical therapy, and too little te reo Māori and te ao Māori, even though all the rangatahi were Māori and some were fluent. So you had these basically a program for Māori that's being run by colonizers. Tell me how this is any different to the old school state care that aimed at assimilating Māori.
It's the same. Exactly.
So all of these things, oh, and of course we can't forget the gang patch legislation that has only resulted in 600 more gang members, and the terrorizing of Māori communities, especially when they're undergoing extremely important and sacred events such as a tangihanga. And we have cops with guns terrorizing them. I want to see them ask those communities if they feel safer with the cops around them, or if they feel safer with the gangs around them. Because you remember, Kahurangi Kara also got in trouble for saying some people feel more safe around a patched gang member than a police officer, and she got so much shit for it. Well, I want to hear from those whānau at the tangi who have police officers with guns around them pointing at their families, at their children, and I want to hear who they feel safer around, the gang members or the police. But we're not hearing from these people.
Erased.
So yeah, we have all of this background going on and these legislations that they're passing at the same time that all of this is happening. And, you know, the situation is actually so much worse than even what Tamatha is saying. The real situation is not just these one-off incidents that I'm telling you about with, you know, a guy getting beaten up, or, oh, I forgot, a 15-year-old child had her jaw broken by prison guards, and they refused to give him care.
I think it was, oh no, prison guards. Yeah, no, you got it. That's right.
I mean, they could have murdered him. They could have killed him. They beat him up. They left him injured. They refused to take him to hospital as well for hours. And I'm glad that Takuta Ferris brought this up in the house as well. He mentioned this case because these are the people that we're talking about that feel unsafe around the police. How could you not feel unsafe around the police if they've broken the jaw of your 15-year-old child? I mean, it's honestly hard to understand how anyone struggles to understand what Tamatha is saying. Oh, he was beaten up by police officers. Pere just double-checked that. Kapai, 15-year-old boy in Hawke's Bay, had his jaw broken, allegedly, by police officers, and then refused to give him care. So, yeah, we've got countless stories like this, but like I was trying to say before, this is so much bigger than just a few individual cases. This really is deeply systemic in terms of the entire police and prison industrial complex. It's all abusing people for being disenfranchised. That's the entire system, not just one-off cases. Because every individual who commits a crime, who has fallen through the cracks in society, is in that situation because either A, and this is the vast majority of cases, their social environment led them to that situation, whether it's colonization or impoverishment, addiction, or so on, or B, they have an underlying mental health issue that leads them to think differently. So in either of those two situations, either they were born evil or they became, harmful to society because of the experiences they had. In both of those situations, how is it logical that punishment is the solution? In the case where someone was born different, then they're born different. There's nothing, there's no blame in the situation. We just need to keep them in a comfortable place out of society. And in the case where people have had negative environments that have turned them that has turned them antisocial, well, we need to change those social environments. And I wanted to touch on the understanding police delivery report, although we're getting a bit on in terms of time. I'm wondering how everyone's feeling.
I think we've made our points on all of this stuff. I think we should get into talking about the next kaupapa.
Kapa, I just wanted to give a couple of examples of the abuse that police do and some more of the statistics, but maybe we can come back to this topic another day.
Bye-bye.
Just, horrific stories about police being called to someone's house because they're suicidal and then ended up mocking them, aggravating them, and then tasering them and setting a dog on them, for example. And there are stories after stories after stories of things like this. and you realize that really it is systemic, this issue, that the vast majority of the cases that police are dealing with can be dealt with by a different group, by people who can provide holistic support, as Tamatha Paul was saying, community organizations that are more knowledgeable about how to treat people with mental health issues, for example, because time and time again, it's these people that are ending up beaten up by the police and placed in prison. And by the way, of the people who use of force includes like the use of tasers, the use of batons, the use of dogs, and of those 46%, 53% of all use of force events are for Māori, and of those Māori, 46% of them were exhibiting or demonstrating mental distress. So you can see that this is an issue about dealing with mental health issues in this country, not about being tough on crime.
Right.
Also, I'm meant to be moving on, but
you are. Let's move on.
Just that warrantless searches have doubled between 2018 and 2019, and this gang patch legislation is only going to make that statistic worse, and Labour is supporting that, of course. So the trauma that is inflicted on our communities through the policing, through knocking down doors and destroying them, through mocking poor and Māori people, and specifically making racist jokes. This is something that came out through the footage, the camera footage that they looked at. Let's look at this report another day.
Kapa. Okay.
Okay. Do you want to talk about Waatea?
Oof. Okay, well, so Waatea. So Sean Plunkett. Oh, we lost our tab there, unfortunately. Now everyone's just looking at my Facebook page. So, Sean Plunkett has gone on holiday to Israel, or Palestine, we should say. And for some reason, Waatea News decided it would be a good idea to interview him. You know, we have journalists in Gaza being killed, being targeted by Israel. They're losing their lives trying to report on the genocide. You know, those are the voices that we should be going to and highlighting. If Waatea wants to interview an individual, you know, makes no sense that Sean Plunkett, you know, for me, he's a disgraced journalist. You know, he brings shame onto the profession of journalism. He kind of blew up because during the COVID period, there was the Public Interest Journalism Fund that the government put out. And a part of the Public Interest Journalism Fund was that people had to align with the government's messaging around COVID-19 restrictions. And there were other parts of it as well. They had to align with, you know, giving effect to the principles of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. But I think the main thing that he gained his audience from was around the fact that they had to align on COVID-19 restriction advice. But anyway, he kind of ran his platform running off of this, like, you know, that he's an independent, that he's not compromised, and that he's a base of truth. But, you know, our engagements with Sean Plunkett, I mean, like, there are all sorts of things that we could talk about in terms of what he has said outside of just you and I. But he has told blatant lies about you and me, you know, saying that we're funded by John Tamahere and making a whole story and headline about it and trying to, like, get us on that. But it's just a complete lie and a complete fabrication. And so from my perspective, he has no legitimacy. He has no professionalism. But anyway, Waatea chooses to interview him while he's just having a holiday over there in Israel. And the main issue that I had was that there was no pushback at all from Waatea, from Matthew Tukaki, who I used to have a high opinion of, but I have to say, Matthew, this has tarnished my perspective of you, because it would have been it would have made a bit more sense if he was bringing on Sean Plunkett and then pushing back against some of the things that Sean was said. But it read and it sounded like a propaganda piece, like a paid advert from the Israeli lobby. Nothing Sean said was pushed against. And, you know, later on, Matthew Tukaki tried to, or I should say Waatea, they brought on John Minto.
The next day. And I did a little bit of investigation. I asked whether he had already asked John Minto to come on, and that's why they felt the need to bring on Sean Plunkett, who I've got here with just one of many, 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 many genocidal extremist tweets that he makes. You just have to go look at his Twitter page to see them. He's just openly celebrating the killing of Palestinians and the destruction of their land. And so I asked John, someone who knows John, to find out when John Minto was interviewed and asked to be interviewed. And it was the next day after the Sean Plunkett interview, on the morning of, 1 hour before John Minto went on. And so clearly they went into damage control, because a lot of us were like, what the hell? Why'd you bring this genocidal maniac who's on a propaganda tour in Israel on your show to just do basically a propaganda piece for Israel? And so they brought in John Minto the next day, and that doesn't fix the situation. We talked about this last week, but this is not one of those situations where you can just bring on two equal sides. There's one side that's committing the worst human atrocity that can be committed on the other side. In the same way that you don't bring in a victim of rape and the rapist on to have equal time, you don't bring on someone to speak on the genocide and someone who supports the genocide and give them equal time. This is a concept we understand in almost every other situation. And, you know, it just really bothers me how normalized anti-Arab hatred, Islamophobia, and anti-Palestinian hatred is in this country. Because if Sean Plunkett was making comments as extreme but about Jewish people, if he was just openly anti-Semitic, if he was openly calling for the mass murder of Jewish people, there's no way in hell Waatea would have him on, and they shouldn't. And they shouldn't. They wouldn't even consider it, right? Because he's a crazy racist anti-Semite. So how come Sean Plunkett, who just openly says anti-Palestinian, anti-Arab, Islamophobic shit, is allowed to come on? Not just that, but the whole platform. The whole platform is just full of racists. They bring on racists all the time. Julian Batchelor is a regular contributor. They bash Māori all day or night. That's their entire business model. So just even as a platform, they're not reliable. But as you said, Sean Plunkett himself, I mean,
just straight up lies, and he doesn't provide any evidence because he's just talking to his constituents, who he's kind of built them up to view us and other individuals like us in a certain way, you know, so they discriminate against us. They hold his words, you know, with a lot of weight. But it's just, yeah, it's pathetic, really. So shame on Waatea for bringing on Sean Plunkett.
Like, did they get paid to have this segment? Because it really just felt like a propaganda piece. There was no pushback at all. And
it's the kind of thing you expect them to do, like, if they brought on John Minto first. I mean, they shared some of the stuff around that Paul Fisher guy, that lawyer who went off on that racist tirade and he, like, dribbled a bit, that guy. So, I don't know, did Juliet Moses ring up Waatea and be like, hey, I'm going to make a thing out of this if you guys don't have one of our people on there? Because that's how it read, like, but yeah, there was, I mean, that was a really tiny thing, the sharing of those posts about that lawyer. Yep. It really does feel like this is some kind of a paid piece, because there was no pushback. There wasn't anything that was of the like equivalent, you know, like a John Minto coming on beforehand that triggered this kind of thing. Like, what was the thing that triggered Waatea to go down here? But, you know, people have been warning me about Waatea for a while. They definitely are on the more conservative side of things. So if one of our Maori media outlets were to go down this avenue, you know, everyone is kind of doing it, right? This attack on woke, you know, and embracing these attacks on Maori and other minority groups. If one of our Maori outlets were to go down that path, it would be Waatea. So it's kind of reflective of just where we're at the moment. But for Tūkaki to go there and to be this puppet for Waatea, massive amounts of respect lost.
Yeah, and you know, the interview itself is like it's worse because Matthew Tūkaki himself said some concerning things. Should I play it or should I just describe
How
it?
long is it?
I think at the beginning, the beginning part doesn't last long, so we just play the beginning bit.
Let's give it a go. Aroha mai e te iwi mo tēnei.
Well, kia ora whānau. We've got a really special guest on the line with us now, all the way from Israel. We've seen all the comments in relation to what is going on in Gaza, and so just to bring a bit of balance to this this really important kaupapa, is let's just quickly recover some of the numbers. It's nearly been a year and a half since the tragedy that occurred in Israel in respect of terrorists invading that nation and killing hundreds, more than 1,000 innocent men, women and children. We're now seeing...
Not true.
I mean, yeah.
That's not true. Not only because Israel applied the Hannibal Directive and killed some of those 1,200 people, but also because hundreds of them were military people. So they were not all innocent civilians. Hundreds of them were military people that were on duty upholding the occupation of Gaza. But yes, innocent people were killed that day.
But, you know, it's not even like an anniversary event or anything, you know? And he's brought it up centering October 7th, you know? Talking about what's happening in Palestine and just immediately going to the centering. I mean, I suppose he's introing Sean Plunkett and that's what they plan on talking about. But any instance where you're going to talk about Palestine and you choose to center and have that as the baseline of the conversation, October 7th, disregards everything that happened before October 7th, which led us to the time and place of October 7th.
Even using the word invade when it's them actually
their
returning
whenua.
to their own whenua
Yeah.
is dodgy, and then it gets even dodgier.
The ongoing conflict affecting many, many more people on both sides of the equation.
Oh, it's
and
equal.
actually somebody that's over in Israel right now, first-hand knowledge and experience of what is going on in the ground, is broadcaster Sean Plunkett, and he joins me on the line. Welcome, Sean.
G'day. Broadcaster. The platform broadcaster.
Had to get that in, brother. Had to get in there. Hey, let's just talk about this. I know you're busy. I know there's a lot going on there at the moment. I saw one of your videos live from the square there. I think it might have been in Tel Aviv.
Hostage Square.
Hostage Square, that's the one. Sorry about that. So obviously, this is something that's been going on for many, many, many years. However,
this conflict has been going on for thousands of years. Truth be told.
Carl, it has not been going on for thousands of years. That's more Israeli propaganda.
Oh, I was just gonna say, Modi Ora has said, Willie needs to rein him in. It was just funny because Willie decided to like this post. Willie Jackson liked Waatea posting this on, I think it was on Facebook, one of the platforms where it equates as a like. So Willie Jackson, brother, Labour, you know, I mean, hey. But yeah, saying that this has been going on for 1,000 years.
Yep, thousands of years.
You know, they're framing it like this exact conflict has been going on for 1,000 years. But you know, it's not the truth.
No, the Israeli colony is under 80-year-old, bro. It's not thousands of years. It's literally under 80 years old. There are literally Palestinians who are older than the Israeli colony. Okay? And for thousands of years, Jewish people, Muslim people, Christian people, people of all faiths, because Palestine is the birthplace of religion, coexisted peacefully in Palestine until the bloody Israeli colony came 80 years ago. And one more terrible thing that they say in this, before I'll stop it.
So what's your first-hand experience of being on the ground there now? I mean, it must be an emotional journey just to be witness to it all.
I have been...
where is that? I don't want to keep playing it, but and soon Tukaki says that, and maybe they've cut it out of the interview because I thought it was earlier, but Tukaki says explicitly, and I'm not exaggerating here, he says, you know, and I think people in New Zealand, we tend to be leaning to one side only, and that is the Palestinian side. So why don't you go and tell us about the other side? So Tukaki genuinely believes that New Zealand is too much on the side of Palestine, even as we have one of the most Zionist governments and media of all the countries in the world. He's got it in his head that we're two-sided with Palestine, and that they're bringing Sean Plunkett on to bring some balance. So the whole thing was terrible. And then at one stage, Sean Plunkett says that Israelis are the Turanga Waiwai.
Well, I mean, does he say it like? Maybe we should try and find it because it's just the wrong
Let's not try and
use
find
of that phrase. But
he says that Israelis believe that if you till the land, it's yours, and so therefore they're like the Turanga Waiwai of the land.
That is their Turanga Waiwai.
Oh, that is their Turanga Waiwai. So he, you know, and Sean doesn't push him on that.
To use that word, man, because he's on a Māori station, he's like, oh, I'm going to use a kupu that these people will resonate with. But if we went on the platform and we were like, hey, Pākehā should return all land to Māori because that whenua represents our tūranga waiwai, you know, he'd be like, woke, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But now he's like, oh, there is a beautiful thing about the tūranga waiwai. And we should respect Indigenous peoples and their place and their tūranga waiwai, you know, it's
the classic. It's the same as the colonizers here saying that they're actually the indigenous ones and that Māori aren't indigenous. It's exactly the same thing. And yeah, as you say, I mean, he doesn't care about indigenous people here or in Palestine, right? He's on the side of the colonizers no matter where they are. And that's the point that we started the stream with, that it's the same people that are aligned on against indigenous people everywhere.
I'm just wondering, Waatea, looks like they receive funding from Public Interest Journalism Fund, which Sean Plunkett is vehemently against. But also just Te Māngai
just
Paho.
Government funding, right? So
Yeah. But just, you know, what are you doing, Waatea?
Yeah.
What are you doing? But yeah, I don't think we need to play the rest of the interview just to save some time and so that we can move on to our next story. You can assume what they talk about, and yeah, basically no energy given to the Palestinian side and just all sorts of genocidal propaganda coming out. The
numbers are not given of how many Palestinians are killed at all throughout the interview. Tukaki just says it's a conflict impacting both sides. Yeah, so both sides in a genocide. Cool, fun, great, Waatea.
Cheers.
So I'm just going to do one more story. I'm going to do it super quick so that y'all and us can enjoy what's left of our Friday night.
Woo!
And it's about Yemen.
Cabo.
And this this text leak from the United States. Apparently a text exchange about the US war plans for Yemen, or at least a discussion about bombing Yemen, was accidentally leaked because they brought in a journalist into their Signal chat. Now, what's interesting is the coverage of it and how they're just worried about American lives. Can you put on the New Zealand One News coverage of it?
Here we go. Looks like we've got the wrong story, but I think it's
giving police additional powers to search the cars of suspected gang members as well as seize cars and weapons. Police say they're also working with gang leaders to help ease the situation.
Tough on crime.
Overseas now, a stunning breach of national security that could have put American lives at risk. Reaction has been fast and fierce after revelations top US officials inadvertently shared classified Yemen war plans with a journalist on a messaging app. It sparked calls for a top-level investigation and for heads to roll. Corazon Miller reports.
The March 15 attack on the Iran-backed Houthis in Yemen was meant to be a top-secret military
Wait, what did she say?
Just wanted to comment. Sorry, we'll go back a little bit. Just a little bit of miscommunication between the team.
Overseas now, a stunning breach of national security that could have put American lives at risk. Reaction.
So they're worried about putting American lives at risk, Etefano. Who are these American lives? The pilots dropping bombs on civilians in Yemen. They're worried that these text plans, and if we go on, she says she's worried that it might get into the hands of Yemenis. Wouldn't that have been a good thing? Then they would have been able to stop the slaughter of their people. But that's not at all.
Could have saved lives.
It's not at all a consideration for our news media. They just go on to talk about how it was threatening American lives. And
I just want to say, like, the Yemeni people, so proud. Like, Palestinians and their resilience, their mana motuhake of their Palestinian tanga is very inspirational. There are no people more resilient than the Palestinians from my perspective, but the Yemenis, with what little they have,
amazing allies, eh?
With what little they have, they are the types of people that make me kind of reconsider my stance on whether or not we should have a military. You know?
Right.
I mean, they're in a different circumstance.
And it's not their official government military.
Right. So how far you have to go to actually defend.
Exactly. To have a militia that will actually defend human rights, it's probably not going to be a state militia, because other state actors like the United States have bought those governments out. That's why you need a non-state actor like the Houthis, or Ansar Allah as they call themselves, to defend Palestinians. And no one else, not one power in the whole entire world has lifted up any arms or anything like that against Israel as they commit a genocide. And you know what? They've killed potentially 100,000 Palestinians. They've completely leveled Gaza to the ground. No one's doing anything. No one's intervening except for Yemen by targeting shipping through the Red Sea. And it's a very classy act, isn't it?
That's beautiful.
They're not even trying to kill people on those ships. They're trying to keep them alive as much as possible. They're just trying to send a message. No business as usual during genocide. And the United States is bombing them for it. And don't forget, of course, that New Zealand supported the first round of bombing campaign, and we also extended it for another 6 months quietly without bringing it to the public attention. And this Intercept article touches on it perfectly. The real outrage about the Yemen signal group is that it called for an attack on a civilian home. This was revealed I would go further than that and say is that it called for attacks on Yemen, full stop. But yes, that is one of the things that came up in the text, is that they specifically agreed to target someone's home. I'm just going to read this article from here. In the group chat, Waltz indicated in order to kill a Houthi official, the US military destroyed a civilian home or apartment building. Quote, the first target, their top missile guy, we had positive idea of him walking into his girlfriend's building, and now it's collapsed, wrote Waltz on Signal. Excellent, Vance replied. And then there was a bunch of like happy emojis. And the Intercept says the attack was another in a long-running war by the US and its proxies against Yemen. For years, the United States backed an atrocity-filled air campaign led by Saudi Arabia against the militant group. Just after entering office, President Biden formally delisted the Houthis as a terrorist group. But after they had started attacking US warships in the Red Sea, they were reclassified as terrorists, and so they started bombing them again, and that's when we joined in. But it cannot be understated that the United States has already destroyed Yemen. They've already devastated their people. They've already terrorized them for years and years and years. It was called a genocidal war at its time, and they created the worst humanitarian catastrophe in the world in Yemen. People are still starving to this day because of this US and Saudi Arabia war against them. That's who is standing up for Palestine right now, and that's who they're bombing for standing up to Palestine right now. And it's as the Intercept says, you know, that too often the news coverage of the Signal chat leak has lacked any real discussion of the actual act of war itself. The fact that the US is bombing people in Yemen. Stephanie Saville, the director of the Cost of War project at Brown University, told The Intercept. 53 people have died in this latest wave of US airstrikes, 5 of them children. These are just the latest death in the long track of record of US killing in Yemen, and the research shows that US airstrikes in many countries have a history of killing and traumatizing innocent civilians, blah, 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 blah. We know that.
And they're one of the poorest countries
Yes.
in the region. And, you know, they should.
In the world.
In the world. They should.
Because of this US-Saudi Arabia war.
They should be one of the richest. You know, when you look at them on a map, you know, the corridor, and this is their tūranga waiwai, you know, it is no fault of theirs that they neighbor this incredibly important corridor. In fact, you know, it's turned out badly for them, right? Because everyone wants to exploit this corridor. I'll search it up.
Yeah, and you know, when our news talks about it, and in that news clip that I'm glad I managed to capture forever and always, they don't give you any context about the fact that Yemen has already faced war at the hands of the United States. They don't tell you that they don't question the ethics of the very facts of the United States bombing civilians. They're not questioning why the hell is it okay to bomb this entire residential building because you want one military dude. Like, imagine if anyone else applied that logic and bombed a whole residential building in the United States because there was one soldier in it. That's the outrageous logic that they're asking us to accept. And in the process, what our news media is doing is they're communicating to us that Yemeni people are subhuman, that killing them is of no consequence whatsoever, and that there's no reason to question the ethics of killing them, and that the only concern whatsoever of this text leak is that it may have endangered the United States' ability to murder people.
Shameful.
No one questioning whether they should be murdering people.
Yes, what is it? Controlled opposition? It's in that realm, right? It's like, oh yes, we are criticizing what America is doing, but what exactly? What aspect of it are you criticizing?
Yes, exactly. And then you've got like this false argument between Republicans and Democrats, where Republicans are saying, it's not that bad a leak, there weren't real war plans, blah, blah, blah. And the Democrats being like, no, it was, it endangered our security, blah, 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 blah. This whole argument going on, no one's discussing whether war is okay.
Just imagine being a Yemeni. Hey, just imagine being someone from Yemen listening to that type of argument. You know, but so this is the map. For those who don't know, right? Here we've got Palestine over here. There is a small little corridor here. It looks like it's not there, but it's very small. Very small little corridor. Oh, I don't think you can see my cursor. Anyway. Just to the left of Israel there, this water here. And then at the bottom you can see Yemen, and this tiny little choke point here. But, you know, so the Yemeni people, they have to put up with all sorts of trading ships going through here, you know, polluting their waters.
It's their waterways.
It's their waters, you know, because, you know, otherwise they have to go all the way around Africa.
Yeah.
Right? So for trading ships, it's much quicker just to cut through this little channel here. And just think of all the disruptions that would happen to this country. You know, they should be charging a toll for every ship that comes through here, charging a toll. But instead, it's the opposite. Ships get to pollute this channel. And because of what the USA has done and everything, suppressing Yemen so that they can't challenge their ships, so that they can't establish something like a toll through this channel. You know, it should be one of the richest countries in the world because of how it is connected to this trading route. But no one wants them to have that type of power. So it's instead been the exact opposite. And I just think it's a good example of how we get our governments and the world elites to actually notice something, right? to get them to actually care about anything. We have to impact
the
them
dollar.
financially. It has to be done. It has to be done. We have to impact the current system financially, otherwise nothing is going to happen.
And really, they're like activist geniuses. They're imposing a blockade that financially impacts people, that they are trying to do it with as little bloodshed as physically possible. They're trying to be non-violent about it, and still, they're, oh, hello, a fairy.
The ngarara coming out.
Oh, the window's
Must have a window open. Oh, mosquitoes in the cabin tonight. Oh.
But yeah, also I wanted to look at this map because it's very telling when you think about who is facing war and imperialism at the moment. And it's either you've already been defeated, like Iraq in many ways, and they've, imposing their puppet regime there, for example. Syria, which they have been working on destroying for a long time. They already occupy a third of it, and then just recently they helped enable the ex-leader of ISIS to take over Syria and is now murdering minorities, but he's going to work with Israel and allow Israel to basically take over. Turkey, they've already bought out their government. Egypt already bought out the government. Sudan, currently facing a genocidal war for their resources. You've got Saudi Arabia already sold out, Oman already sold out, United Arab Emirates already sold out. Yemen hasn't sold out, so they're facing war. And so it's when you look at the map and you understand that this is about trade routes, it's about resources that are easily accessible to the trade routes, you understand that this is a project of US imperialism. They are trying to take over this entire region, the resources of this region, and to profit from them. And Yemen and Palestine are on the front lines fighting against this imperialism. And it's just basically the process that we're seeing here in Aotearoa. They come and take the land, but even more than that, they want to privatize all the resources. And it's like a constant state of colonization. Like, if I could bring it back to Aotearoa, they're not content with having, stolen the vast majority of the land and imposed a government on everyone. They're still trying to colonize us, right? By bringing in more mining companies, privatizing our hospitals, any more ways that they can extract wealth from the people and the land. That's the trajectory of colonialism. And a lot of these countries, they haven't fully conquered yet, and that is why they're at war.
Kia kaha, everyone. Kia kaha.
Ka pai.
So is that it?
That's it. I'm not going to go into the next story at Tefano because my mum keeps telling us you're going.
Our biggest fan.
Yeah, you're doing your streams too long. No one wants to watch you for 3 hours. Okay, just no, she doesn't quite put it like that. But yeah,
she gives us good advice. We are thinking about making these shorter, but I think what we need to do is we need to make our short content and also do a nice long stream because it's nice to have this kind of corridor where we're not constrained and having to ram in things really quickly and overly think about what we're saying. It's so but just for everyone else out there thinking that maybe these things are a little bit too long,
we know
we're just addicted to yarning, to be honest. But the idea, like, I think maybe like when we do like maybe 20 episodes or something like that, we'll reassess, we'll see where we're at. Maybe we can do a crowdfunding campaign to get another cabin, another off-grid cabin.
Yeah, we need a studio, folks.
And really just go nuts and maybe think about getting a few other, maybe even some staff members, who knows. But we all, as well, the day and time, we were talking about this at the beginning of the stream. If y'all want to leave in the comments or just let us know, maybe message us what is a good time for you for a stream. We'll probably put out a survey or something like that. And it's always impossible to get a time that works for everybody. But the Friday evenings, who knows? Maybe we do like a Tuesday and a Thursday, something like that. And then maybe like a weekend in the middle of the day. Who knows? But we're open to reassessing. And we develop things as we go.
I have to address this comment.
Oh, kapai. He knew it was potent perspective. He knew it was off topic, but kapai.
But he knew it was potent.
But he knew it needed to be. I was gonna bring it up, but I didn't want to sidetrack you on the corridor that you had.
Oh, I'm just like, oh dang! I saw that councillor speaking up about that, and I was like, that's awesome. That's amazing. Great mahi. And now to hear that she's been stripped of her responsibilities, I'm gonna have to look that up. But that's awful, and just it speaks to why so many councillors and politicians are whipped into acting according to party lines and acting according to whatever the majority wants, because you get punished if you stick your neck out, right? So that's a sad story. You're going to have to look it up. It might have to come into the next episode.
And I think as well, apologies. We didn't talk too much about imperialism in this episode, but it was kind of like a headline. I think we just ran into so many other stories when we were researching for Parliament Unpacked and for Tamatha that the imperialism aspect of tonight's wānanga might have been on the short end of things.
Yeah.
But this is just, sometimes we put out a title or we say what we're going to do and it just shifts. It just changes because, we're a team of two and things can change quite quickly. So just an apology, just a little mihi, just in case you're thinking that we were going to talk more about that and we didn't. We can do it in the next episode.
Yeah. Really want to talk
but
about...
But who knows, other things will probably pop up, right? And
the idea was that Waatea News, One News, politicians, they all agree when it comes to war being okay and acceptable, when it comes to US wars and imperialism, and that it never gets questioned anywhere. But yeah, maybe not that. No,
oh yeah, that's right. We should let everybody know that you're going to be on BHN. It's going to be nice having an actual leftist on the leftist collective, eh? No, just kidding, team. But yeah, looking forward to seeing how that goes.
It's going to be interesting. I think we're going to, I think in terms of the other people there, I might be the most strongly anti-Labour person on the panel.
Right.
And yeah, I'm probably...
love their mahi. Love
gonna
BHN.
Be there to highlight why we need to shift away from Labour, in my opinion. Yeah, absolutely love the work.
I'm really looking forward to that.
I watched I've been watching it recently as well, and just really enjoying it. Really enjoying the chats and the comments for those of you who are there as well. So looking forward to Sunday. Should be good.
Ka pai. Ngā mihi mai o ha, kia koutou. It's been a lovely night. This was a nice stream, eh? I enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's cool.
But yeah, thank you all so much. Really appreciate you being here. For everyone there who left thoughtful comments, thank you so much. Hey, while you're here, why not click like on the stream? This is the kind of stuff they do on VH. Like it. You got to do it, eh? You got to do it. Do hit a like on the stream right now if you're with us. As a little goodbye present, we'd really appreciate it. It really does help with the algorithm and things like that. And thank you again. We'll be back in a week's time. You'll see Samah on BHN Sunday. I think 9 p.m. Someone's put 8 p.m. Maybe it starts at 8 p.m., but I think it runs late into the night anyway. So yes,
right.
Paul Māori, good night, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Good night, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Friday and your weekend, and see you next week. Ka kite.
Ka kite.
Much love. Wait, what was...